Can I do one? They didn't do a salad.
I don't know. That last night. I'll have a later. It's something great. Oh, yeah. No, it's good. We're ready and recording whenever you're ready.
Jessica can't see us, correct?
She can't see us, she can see the presentation.
Okay. So Jessica, we're all here whenever you're ready to call the meeting to order and begin.
Okay, can you see my messages? Because I asked that. I just need to know how I'm communicating.
I can see that, Jessica, I'm sorry, I missed.
Oh,
that
that's
first one.
okay. Okay, no biggie. I just wanted to make sure. So that's a good way to communicate if needed.
Yes, it is, it's perfect.
Okay. All right, sounds good. So we will get our meeting underway. It's 4:02. And we will do the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So Tammy, I'd like to recognize that we have all current board members present, and we have Joel Hoff and Dwayne Yucca as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll pass our time over to Janet with the OSBA.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for having me tonight. I'm very excited to be here. First time in Prineville, although a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Hood River, so was really small when I was growing up there. And of course, as times change and the world is evolving, it has definitely expanded. Each time I go visit, I'm like mind blown by how much development. And so it reminded me a little bit of that when I was driving in the little downtown. I was like, oh my gosh, give me some flashbacks. So I'm an Oregonian my whole life, went through the education system myself, the K through 12 public system. I'm very passionate about this work. And I've been with OSBA for 3 years and worked all over the state doing basic roles and responsibilities training, which is really foundational and important for you to do continuous professional development so that you're staying up to date with the latest research and practices. So that's why I'm here today. Oh, it's not working. That's quicker. A little bit of technical difficulties, but that's okay. The next slide is basically just who am I? And that's who I am with the Lighthouse Study, and it is great research. And essentially that was a really good research that found how your actions, your behaviors are tied to student impact, student achievement. But recently there's been more. So again, we're always constantly looking at ways to improve as well. Is Tom Alsbury around improving school board effectiveness. So I just want to show you kind of a snapshot, and there's a lot more other researchers, but he's one that we've really partnered with to do some work. And this is what we partnered with to do some work around is the 12 governance standards. Essentially, I kind of see them as your roles and responsibilities. Tonight's about roles and responsibilities, but we're going to dive into these because if you are able to understand these standards and know how to put them into practice, you're going to impact student achievement. And so that's my role here to, improving school board effectiveness. And these are the 12 standards we're going to dive into. Oh, wait, is it working? No. Oh, yep. All right. So standard 1, vision directed planning. And this one is super key. And we're going to talk about what does that mean, right? What is vision directed planning? So your vision, setting your vision, that is the role of the board to make sure it gets done. It's collaborative work as well as the district goals. And I'm going to show you kind of the process that we walk boards through. But essentially your vision, right? What is your vision? All students can learn and succeed. It's those beliefs, which I looked at your website and you do already have listed essentially your values, your vision. Oh, we can't see it. If you move.
Yeah.
How many of you have seen this on your website? Good, awesome. It's on, under your strategic plan, under your board. Yeah, I did my homework. I like to make sure again that I tailor based on your district. So this is yours, your vision, your values, which I thought was fantastic, and I'm gonna walk through a couple of things here. Oops, go back. But essentially, right, this is your eye on the prize. I love what you said, your eye on the prize. So if you believe all students could learn and succeed, that's really important, right? What does that mean in terms of all students can learn and succeed? What does success look like for students here at Crook County School District, right? Those are the kind of questions that you as a board within your role of oversight and governance can ask and should be asking, especially because that is one of your role is to set that vision directed planning. So kudos to you, because you do have laid out your vision, right? And you also have your beliefs and values. We believe honest and open communication. We believe you must provide quality education. I'm not gonna go through all of it, but we believe co-curricular opportunities. We believe it is the shared responsibility of the entire community to educate, support, and nurture every child. We believe in diversity and ensuring equal treatment and access to resources. This is fantastic, folks. It's great. How many of you were a part of this? Yeah, great. No worries. No, it's all good. That's all good. So in terms of setting the strategic direction, which is your role of the board, and you do it collaboratively though, right? That's why I wanted to talk about collaborative governance as well. This is the process that we kind of walk through with boards. So you set the vision, mission, goals, or priorities. It depends on the district. Some districts call it district goals, which you do. But some other boards, they call them priorities, district priorities. So terminology varies. So I just list them all. But that is your role again, right? The what. What do you envision success looking like for Crook County School District? What do you envision in that plan of 3 to 5 years, however long that strategic plan is? What do you want students here at Crook County School District? How are they going to succeed, right? Setting that vision, your beliefs, which you've already done. And it's done again collaboratively with stakeholder input. When you do this process, if you're starting it from the beginning because you're starting a new strategic plan, absolutely, I recommend you involve stakeholder input. And what do I mean by that? Your community, right? Which I heard you do a great job. Community engagement and involvement was one of your strengths. You want to continue that to be a strength, but this is, in my opinion, a meaningful way to engage the community, right? And we're going to talk about public comment later as well. But that's what we mean in terms of you need to ensure it gets done, but it's done collaboratively. The planning piece is the superintendent's role, where once you set that direction, that vision, those goals, the superintendent then takes that and figures out how those are going to be met, right? It's usually a strategic plan, or it can be called a lot of different things too. But in your instance, it's called strategic plan. Now, alignment, that is the role of the board, because you as a board need to make sure when you see the plan that it aligns with those district goals, right? That's a way to hold the system accountable. You do get to see that plan and make sure there's alignment in the plan. And then this is a piece that sometimes gets missed, the monitoring, which again is the role of the board. And that's essentially just making sure that things are moving along, that progress is being made on those district goals. Because what you don't want to have happen is for your district goals to be on your website or posted somewhere, but then where's the measuring the progress of it? That is your role. And I actually have developed monitoring plans and have done this entire process with boards, even from the beginning, and involving community, and who are those community members that need to come: students, teachers, administrative level, business leaders, community or small businesses. So it's really important work, and it shows results, if you take the time to do it. And again, your board already has done that. You even have those strategic plan goals, and I just listed them here. They're straight from your website. But what I loved about your strategic plan, I know some of you didn't have a part in it, but Scott, I know you did, is underneath it, you say what you're going to do with those goals, right? Board believes in continuous incremental improvement, which is why I'm here. So that's already getting addressed. Regularly monitors and reports to the Crook County community. So measures the the district goals. So my question is that happening? Is there?
That had been happening. We're a little off track at the moment,
Okay.
but there was a
And that's okay.
regular quarterly report on the stoplight system.
Mhm. Yeah.
Where we were getting to.
Okay, and that's
And with
okay.
this plan today, I think we'll get back on track.
Perfect. Okay, great. And that's what I'm here too, is just to remind you of some of those things. I know there's seasoned board members, but new board members as well, so that you're aware too of some of these best practices. And then it also said that you'll annually review and update the district goals. So I don't know if that, do you have it in the
What
calendar?
we're doing right now.
Oh, you're doing that right now. Okay, perfect. So again, that's just the process that we follow at board development and the process I've done with several boards. And again, it's that collaborative, but it is your role to ensure it gets done, right, as a board. You identify that what, and that's really your governance role right there. That's the difference between the governance versus management, which is the role of the superintendent. So again, the direction, right? Your systems thinking, your envisioning, what are those? To me, the district goals are really vision statements of where you want the district to be at the end of those 3 or 5 years, or however long that strategic plan is. That's how I like to explain them. They're mini vision statements of what you want your students, how you're going to, what does success look like here at Kirk County School District? In order to do that though, and when I start this process, which I think is really important, is for you to know who your students are, and more specifically, their needs. So how many of you, raise of hands, know who your students are here at Kirk County School District?
Would that involve board members visiting the classrooms?
Yeah, that's my next question is how do you or how could you know who your students are? So yeah, if you're visibly out there in the community, right, or going to classrooms or going to events, maybe school events, concerts, football games, you name it. How else?
I volunteer for lunch duty. And I attend a lot of sports. I have kids that play sports. I did attend classroom visits with Dr. Yucca to see how our classrooms operated.
Awesome. So during this process, whether you're reviewing it annually, like you mentioned, right, in your, underneath your goals, you have that you're gonna review them annually. Or if you're starting fresh, really important to look at the data, right, to understand who are your students and what are their needs. And that's why it's important to do it collaboratively and bringing in all the stakeholders when you're doing that process. Because data, quantitative is great, but also qualitative. And during those, when you're starting the process, either new or you're revising it, you can still also get stakeholder input. It's important to have those discussions and conversations so that you can identify student needs, identify gaps, identify strengths because you want to maintain those strengths, growth. It helps with future planning, right? The 3 to 5 year, depending. The budget, once the budget is done, you can kind of, you should be looking for alignment and seeing where those district goals are showing up in the budget. Usually for the budget, that's going to be in the narrative that either the superintendent or the business manager will give. Because as a board, your role is not to look at every single line item. And boy, that would take forever going through every single line item. But you do want to make sure that it's aligned with the district goals that you set as a board. And then it helps with policy making and decision making. Right. And these are just some indicators of the kind of data that you can see. When I do this, I meet with the superintendent and say, hey, come up with just some initial data so that you can start to have those conversations with all the stakeholders on addressing and answering that question of who are your students and what are their needs, right? So it can either be racial, socioeconomic diversity. Again, every community is different, so it may look different. So it really depends. Academics, state test scores, health and wellness, social, emotional, physical, program enrollment. These are just some key indicators. Program enrollment, participation rates, attendance rates, graduation rates. That's a big one, right? That we always are looking at. But when you're looking at data within your role as a board, what are you noticing or seeing in the patterns? Are there trends? Are there gaps? Are there certain populations or subgroups of students that are graduating at lower rates and asking yourself why? What's happening there? What's the correlation? How is the district performing between different grade levels? Does the data have a correlation with the district goals and the vision and mission, right? You want to make sure, I hope that you're starting to connect the dots. But these are all kind of reflection questions that matter during that process of vision directed planning, and also when you're looking at data in general. And does the data tell you how the district goals are progressing? And so that's that monitoring piece. So essentially engaging with the community and setting, taking that time, right, to set those and set the direction for the district. All right, standard 2. So we're gonna go over 12, but some of them I'll go a little bit faster, so don't worry. Standard 2, community engagement. So while I was talking about vision directed planning, I mentioned that, in my opinion, that's meaningful engagement. Community engagement oftentimes is known as public comment, which is important. We do recommend you have a public comment policy and that you have a process in place, because your meetings are open to the public. You get to decide, though, when to have those public comments, which we do recommend that you have. And you have a policy, which was revised, and when you're looking at policies, you want to look at the revision or adopted date. And so yours was revised in 2023, so that's fantastic. There's just a few things I wanted to call out here in your policy. This is your policy, which we host on our at OSBA. And down here, the first line, the board chair has discretion to waive time limits or extend the overall time allotted for public comment. But then above that, you said there's a time limit of 4 minutes, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that here in a moment. And then important to notice criticism regarding staff members, right? It is not a space for public complaints, right? And if that's the case, the chair should, intervene. And if the chair isn't intervening, other board members can say, hey, point of order, remember that we can't discuss, as it says here, a person speaking during the designated portion of the agenda may offer objective comments of district operations and programs. The board will not hear comments regarding any individual's district staff member, right? So even if they were to say the football coach, that's identifying already that individual as well, okay? Doesn't just have to be the name.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, Siri. Fun times with technology. Okay, sorry, folks. Another thing too, which I know can create some frustration. I've done a lot of work with community engagement with other boards, and we say, and best practice is it's only a time for the board to listen, which can be a little frustrating, especially for community members and for the board too. Because if there's somebody or a student or a parent or whoever, right, in your community expressing concerns and you're just listening, they're like, why aren't they responding, right? So a way to kind of go about that, because we do encourage you do only listen, and there's reasons for that. And the reason for that is because you don't want to just address one person. That's not addressing your whole community. That's number one. Number two, if one of you were to address and maybe say the wrong thing, because oftentimes whatever, not always, but oftentimes it's gonna fall under the purview of the superintendent to figure out, what to do with those comments that they hear during public comment. But you don't wanna respond and then have another board member engage and say, no, that's not right. It's not gonna look good. And you don't want to have a debate in front of your community. So those are a couple of the reasons why we say just listen. And that's why, in my opinion, it's not meaningful engagement, right? Because you're not being able to dialogue. But there are other ways to do so. There's listening sessions. There's also, as I mentioned, involving in the process of district vision directed planning.
Well, let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah.
So Cheyenne, Jessica, myself, all have experienced having people publicly attack us and make some pretty nasty comments in public comments recently, because some people can't seem to behave in a civilized way.
Mhm.
So what do you, since with a no response approach, what do you suggest? we
So
do
for
about
that, that's a little bit different, right? That's similar to stopping a criticism of, where did that, oh, sorry. That's similar to stopping the criticism of a staff member. It's the same thing. You cannot hear, there's a process. If there's a complaint against a board member, the chair should intervene and say, this is not the space for that. There's, a procedure or process. That's different. So if it's informational and sharing those kinds of things, and because you're intervening based on the policy, absolutely, yes. What I'm talking about is dialogue. asking questions, follow-up, right? What happened with the case? That's what I mean. Great point, though.
So Jessica and Jennifer,
So-
did you hear that?
And if the chair doesn't intervene, you can also say point of order. Well, you don't want to do it all the time. Point of order, right? But yeah, and sorry, Jessica, yes. Were you gonna say something?
I think just following up on, I think more or less how to direct this back to our community. And maybe that's something myself and Dr. Yucca can work on with you. Like Scott said, because it's not really clear, because we're not technically staff members of the district. We're volunteer community members, really. So I think that's where the lines get blurred, is that I don't think there's an understanding that we fall as staff members.
Yeah, so I don't know if you follow as staff members, but your policy for public complaint, which I'll show to you in a moment, and thank you for saying that, and I do have some best practices around that as well, because you're absolutely right that it's the awareness, and not, just like I'm here today talking about your roles and responsibilities, the community may not know what your roles and responsibilities are. And so what I recommend before even opening public comment, and we actually have little mini scripts, and I'm happy to share that later with Tammy to forward on to you.
Okay.
Little scripts to just explain kind of like what the expectations are, and just explain why you can't respond, right? If you set that up at the beginning and the chair just reads a tiny little script saying, we're only gonna listen and here's why, right? And also just a friendly reminder, we cannot hear criticism of staff, nor can we hear criticism of board members. That would be a way to communicate that before even
Okay.
getting to, right? So that
Yeah.
would be my recommendation in terms of how can we figure out a way to address it.
Yeah, our public comment is probably our hardest part of our meetings. So I think definitely deep diving into this topic would be helpful for sure. So something like that would be very useful, I would think, to have moving forward.
What about, criticism of another community member? So for example, prior to myself being on the board, I was invited to the last board meeting. And then I was berated as I was sitting, not as a public servant yet, just as a parent and a community member. And had people criticizing me and nobody stopped it. So like.
In the
what-
moment, criticizing you during public comment?
Yes, during public comment, but I wasn't like a part of the board yet or anything like that, and so they just went on and on.
So a public disruption.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what is the board's role if that happens again, like, say somebody comes in public comment and starts talking about like a parent or somebody, that's, you would just say point of order. Do we
No,
have
you wouldn't say point of
policies?
order, so the chair should, the chair's role is to follow decorum and make sure that things are running along smoothly like a facilitator, right? And so the chair should essentially intervene if there's a disruption in the public as well. And we actually have guidance for that. Like, what do you do when, and that was a big one around public comment a few years ago. So whether it's a disruption, the board is being disruptive, right, when you're up there, but also the community, you need to stop that, right? And there's ways to go about that. And I'm gonna bring it back to modeling the way for students, right? Those behaviors you're modeling for your students, that it's okay to be, and you shouldn't, right? And so I sometimes tell chairs, like, if you notice it and you want to stop it, just remind them, friendly reminder, be respectful, be, we're leaders for students. Like, that usually will make a connection instead of saying like, you're behaving bad, or, just kind of, there's words and we can help with that as well. So if that does come, again, we have a guidance even on disruption of the community as well as disruption on the board. Good question.
I have a question. In our public comment policy, and this may just, if we just put this in there, is what my thought is could we maybe add something in there that says your public comment is limited to what is on the agenda?
Well, it says
It's already
mine.
in our policy, I think.
What a good segue, because that was something I wanted to, an observation I made. Because what I noticed is you have that it's, and yes, Jessica, you're right, it's in your policy under number 5, that a person getting public comment is established a limit of 4 minutes. But then you have that the board chair has the discretion to waive time limit or extend it. My recommendation to boards is to be very careful with that, because you want to be fair and
Favorites real quick.
yes, that exactly. And so what I recommend is just be consistent. If you're gonna extend 1 minute, you're gonna have to extend it for all, right? And so
It's not
that
the
can get-
extension Jennifer's talking about. It's the topic, right, Jennifer? Isn't that what you said?
Oh, yeah, and that's also in your policy. Yep.
That's what I
that-
thought.
Yes, it is. You're correct. I don't remember what number is it. Right there, number 3, a person speaking during public comment portion of the meeting may comment on a topic on or not on the published agenda. So it doesn't have to necessarily be on the agenda. The board at its discretion may require that a proposal, inquiry, or request be submitted in writing and reserve the right to refer the matter to the administration.
I guess what my,
So that would be wording you'd want to change, Jen.
that's what I was wondering, is if we took that out, that part out about not on the published agenda, maybe that would alleviate some of the people that come and are, grading others. I don't know. It was just a thought.
So we have a policy service department, so that might be a question if you want to ask our policy department. We do have our policy services that help sometimes revise and we always, the policy department also puts out, policy updates and recommendations for some of those updates and policies, and sometimes public comment, I think, is one of those.
So what about people who show up and want to comment on things that have absolutely no relationship to the school district? Like read us an article out of the newspaper, which we actually had happen, that are not related to schools. Can we say it's not germane and the chair rule it out of order?
That's a good question, and I would have to look further into, I don't see that listed on your policy, and I'd want to ask our policy about that. Also, if there's somewhere in public meetings law.
I mean, it seems reasonable that people who want to comment to a school board ought to be talking about school things.
Right, yep, and that's kind of what you're saying too, right? That the topic needs to be related to the agenda. It can't just be something random, or like you're saying, a random person, or somebody who's not directly connected.
Or if they have a complaint, to follow procedure
That's my thing is,
and send it to.
before you open your mouth and just go on a rant, have you attempted to resolve the situation before it ever got to this point?
Mhm.
Because, this isn't just a complaint department. So
Yeah.
Go through the system first.
Mhm.
There's somebody who will listen, just this is not the place or the time to do it.
Right, and you have that in your policy, that this is not, you are not gonna listen to public complaints. There's not that space for that. Absolutely right. I'm gonna move this along just for time. These are great questions, and yeah, if you're jotting down, we can connect later as well, and I'm happy to share more resources around public comment, like the script, Jessica, at the beginning that you can read, that disruption guidance as well, and I'll look into what you just asked Scott as well.
Thank you.
So overall, for community engagement, as I'm sure you're aware, it's very complex. It is very complex, and it is systemic as well. And so what I tell boards and what I've done with other boards and my colleagues as well is we'll assess the situation and just have a conversation with the board, like, how are your public comments? Who's coming to public comments? Is it the same group of folks, or are you listening from, everyone in the community? Like, are students coming? Like, who's missing at the table? Right? So that you can hear during those public comments. And maybe you need to, engage a little bit more and figure out how that looks like. So identify the level of community engagement, right? Are you gonna involve them in the district planning? Are you gonna hold a listening session if there really is a concern you're starting to hear as a big theme? But remember your role, right? So the superintendent, you should be listening to your constituents, absolutely. And the superintendent publicly leads the district. So oftentimes, it is gonna be important for the superintendent to figure out, okay, who else needs to get invited to the table, and who should be a part of the district vision directed planning process in terms of stakeholders. And this I love in terms of meaningful engagement. When, once you've created your district goals, you involve the community, and we are doing a monitoring session or looking at progress, right? Usually I recommend just one quarterly, and that the board focuses on one key district or 2 goals that they can monitor throughout the school year. And then once they get updates on what's happening related to that district goal, creating some talking points of how they can share that now to the community. So this little engagement plan I shared with other boards and they love it. And this to me is closing the loop and actually engaging meaningfully your community. And you're doing it together, following policy, your authority as a board, because you cannot speak on behalf of the board unless you have the authority to do so. However, if you agree after you've heard progress on the goal, hey, we're gonna share all of this, board members, I'm gonna share it at this place on this date. If you don't have, let's say, like, I heard you volunteer somewhere, Jessica, like if you wanted to share it somewhere that you volunteer, or you're involved in other organizations. I looked at your bios, a lot of you are involved in a lot of great things, so that's fantastic. You can go and share that. And then at the bottom, it says we will debrief our community engagement commitments at our next board meeting on X. So in that plan, you even say when you're going to come back and debrief what you heard when you gave that update, because you can't like speak on behalf of the board, you can express your own opinions, but you can tell those folks when you tell them like, hey, this is what's happening, you know, with the district goals, and this is what we just learned recently is happening. And if they come with questions, be like, oh, you know, thank you for your questions. We're gonna debrief as a board. I can't speak on behalf of the board. It's a great opportunity to also educate the community because, like I said, nobody knows, sometimes the community doesn't know what your roles and responsibilities are. So take it as a way to educate as well. But folks love this in terms of a tool to utilize for community engagement. All right. Effective leadership, standard 3. And that is what you're doing. Again, modeling the way for students, making sure that you're staying up to date, understanding your roles and responsibilities. That is all leadership. So in terms of your roles and responsibilities, you govern, you don't manage, right? You're that what versus how. Management is the day-to-day operations of the district. You don't want to do that. I saw somebody nod no. You don't want to do that. Again, you hire the superintendent, which is a really critical, important role of yours. So you need to trust that the superintendent is going to get that work done, right? So again, that's what we mean about effective partnership, being supportive of each other, having clear understanding of your expectations, and why I mentioned that tool, board operating agreement, because it's a great way to even set some expectations of how you're going to communicate too, as well. I've had some boards or superintendents will even have cafe times to just check in with board members. So there's a lot of different resources and best practices out there. And that's my role, is to share them with you, especially those who are newer. But even then, seasoned board members, after I do trainings, they're like, oh, wow, I forgot about that. Or, oh, that's changed, or that policy is different. I see Scott nodding his head. Thank you for that validation. Perfect. Standard 4, accountability. That is a really important standard. And what I tell boards is, just as I've mentioned, right, you need to hold the system accountable, monitor those district goals. How are you holding yourselves accountable? Your performance. You have to evaluate the superintendent, or you should every year evaluate the superintendent on their performance. But on the flip side, how do you know how you're performing as a board? Right? So really useful tool that we just revamped, and we're just going through them right now, all 12 standards, is a board self-evaluation. A lot of boards like it because it's done anonymously. We analyze the data and then we present it, the results. We ourselves don't even know who took it because you take it with the self-identifier. So we don't even know who took the survey. It's completely anonymous. And it's based on the 12 standards. There's 84 questions. You go through it. It's about 20 to 25 minutes to complete. After you're done, we collect the data, analyze it, and then bring you the results. And really the most effective part of it, and what we've heard from boards, is that discussion, because we're able to show you where there's disagreement and where there's not some alignment. So, you know, it's split 3-2, like what's happening here? Right? Or a lot of you think, is this right? Right? Because data sometimes can be skewed. And so it's important. That's why we come in and we do a facilitated discussion to kind of call out like what's happening here. Right? And we'll do some guiding questions, kind of like I'm doing tonight. But it's a really great tool because it's important for yourselves to hold each other accountable as well. Your performance, just like you hold the superintendent. For professional development too. You can create a plan after that as well, because then you can see, oh, where are our strengths? Where are our areas of growth, right? After seeing the data and then having a discussion, and then plan accordingly, because you are super busy. I know you are. Your agendas are packed. Tonight's agenda is packed. I saw it. And so it's important during that July organizational meeting that you look and see, okay, when can we do some professional development? I strongly recommend professional development not be part of a board meeting, but a separate work session. Yes, it's another meeting, but it's super important to take that time. And so if you have a monitoring session, I would say make it a work session. And that's why, when you're valuing yourself, and then you can plan, so you don't get overwhelmed, like, oh, there's so many meetings, you can plan throughout the year. And even look and see, okay, we're doing a soup eval in March, because that's when it's due. Budget is in March, April too. Okay, let's not pack something else in that time. Why don't we do it this? Another great way too is for board retreats. You can just knock out a couple things in 6 hours, and it's in the summer, you typically, but it depends, before the school year starts. That's also a great way to just utilize your time efficiently, because I know you're very busy. And so this is one way, school board activity calendar. So that's in terms of accountability, right? Holding the system accountable, but also holding yourselves as a board, your performance. Data, which we talked already a little bit about. It's important, to look at data, and how to get that data. So I wanted to just show you your policy BBAA. And again, it was revised, if you look at the top left corner in 2021, which is recent, that's good. Sometimes I've seen them way out of date, and then I'll be like, hey, maybe it's time to review your policy. But here I just wanted to call it a few things, which I already did, right? That individual, that you don't have the authority on that first red arrow without the board. You have to have authority of the board. You cannot speak on behalf of the board, right? We talked already that you can express your personal opinions, but you need to be clear that they're your personal opinions. Although that one sometimes, even if you express that they're your opinions, and I'll just give a quick example, social media, sometimes the community, especially in smaller communities, just view you as a board member. So whether it's right or wrong what you're posting and you're saying, this is my personal opinion, you're held to that kind of standard from the community. So just be aware of that. And I know that's your own personal accounts, but it's just something to just think about and be mindful about. And I wouldn't be doing my duty, that my role is to tell you those best practices. So request for information, it says here, any individual board member who desires a copy of an existing report or survey prepared by the administrative staff will make that request from the superintendent, right? So that's how you can make requests, including data. There is a little caveat. A copy of the material may be made available for each board member. Requests for the generation of reports or information which require additional expense. So if that report requires an additional expense, then that needs to be approved by the board. The board needs to consider it and then make the request to the superintendent. But overall, yes, you should be getting information. And I would even say have a discussion. Do a board operating agreement if you don't have one, on how you want to get information and how that you can stay within your lane. And just create some clear expectations with each other. You're a partnership. So just have a conversation about it. Sometimes that's all it takes, is just a conversation around expectations.
So are you saying that if I write a request to Dr. Yucca for something, then every member of the board should receive it as well?
That's what your policy says. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that, because I'm not sure if we're following that or if anyone has utilized that. I think where I get hung up is the serial communications.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us are more fearful of that rather than using it as a positive to communicate, I guess, in one way or another. So I know I would be hesitant on that. I try to follow, Scott brought up a lot of good pointers at our first work session in July that I have written down, but I think a lot of this gets a little gray. I think when you start putting things in writing and understanding, somebody accidentally hit reply all, or, something like that. So I just would wonder what if something is sent, don't reply at all, or, because like
Yeah.
if somebody else requested something and I got a copy, how would I know what it's for? You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
can I ask questions? Can I not ask questions?
Absolutely. Email correspondence, which is why I said that's usually one of the top ones that get discussed around expectations in an operating agreement. But thank you for bringing that. Let's take it a step back, because what I don't want you to take from this is that you can all be asking the superintendent, I want this, I want this, I want this, right? That's not the expectation. What I would say is, if there's something that you need, because there's, and more than likely, and this is why setting that time to just communicate and see how the best process is, more than likely, if there's something on the agenda, the superintendent knows, because they plan the agenda with the chair. What reports maybe need to be shared, right? That's that balance. Let's take it back to that balance continuum where the superintendent is going to make sure that they give you the information you need, right? So you're prepared. Now, there may be sometimes, like, let's say a report that maybe you're like, ooh, this is, you know, a report that maybe you should share. And that's like a recommendation and you get to decide whether or not, right? If one, the data is even available at that time for that matter. In terms of your question about serial meetings, thank you for bringing that up. I always say, set up your process before you need it, right? What's your email correspondence process? You can share like information, like what you have to be careful is to not engage in a dialogue, right? When it's involving district business, board business. That you cannot do in a quorum, because then yes, that is a serial meeting. And that includes texting, and that includes social media threads as well. And even if you're at an event and you start discussing as a quorum, 3 of you are talking about board business or something that happened, that also, you know, you can't do. But you can absolutely, like, informational things is okay. Like, hey, the next board meeting, and send it to all those kinds of things is okay. In this case, a report, the superintendent could just send it to all of you. That way you wouldn't have to send it, Jessica, the superintendent would. And that's okay for the superintendent and even Tammy. A lot of times the process that I see a lot of boards implement is that everything goes through the board secretary then funnels everything through. So everybody gets that information. So that way you don't have to be the one sending it to all the board members. And again, set up your system. Every system is different. You got to kind of discuss what makes more sense. You know, superintendent, board secretary, how can we make sure essentially that we're just all getting the information we need in that informed oversight role? Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Thanks. All right. I'm gonna skip this, I think, just for the time, but I wanted to do, let's see, what time is it? Do we need to take a break, or are we gonna break at 6? Should I power through?
I'm good to power through.
I'm asking the board, do you want to take a little break, or do you want to just stop at 6, you take your break and then continue with your agenda?
I'm stop at 6.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I also know it's important to take care of ourselves, so.
I'd like you to utilize all the time that's needed with this training. That's why I continue to ask for the agenda to be shortened, because we knew that this was a long agenda. So Joel is aware, he's the last item. He is aware that his time may be short. So
Okay,
unfortunately, it's just how our agenda stacks up.
Yeah. I will also say, you know, you're right, maybe I won't pass through anything. Thank you for saying that. Because I've had boards too, like I said, usually this is a 3-hour training, who will bring me back to just, you know, hey, I want to keep having conversations, or you talked about public comment, like, can we dive deeper with you on it for an hour or whatnot? So you can always bring me back as well. So yeah, thank you for that. All right, I just wanted to be mindful of time, and it is important to take care of ourselves. After 2 hours, I know it can get a little tiring. All right, well then let's do this quick little scenario, just to bring it into practice a little bit in terms of data. During a recent presentation by the superintendent, a board member questioned the lack of detail in the data presented for each district goal. While the data provided a good global view of student success in the district, the board member wanted to see the data broken down further by individual classroom in each school, so they can assess individual teacher and school effectiveness. So my question to you, don't do it yet, because I'm going to ask you here in a moment to do it, but thumbs up if this is something that the board can do. Thumbs down if this is something that the board can't do. Or put your thumb to the side. Maybe, it depends, I don't know. So I'm gonna give you 1 minute, and then I want you all at the same time to decide. Thumbs up, down. Yeah, I know, don't look at your neighbor and wait, because I can see. Same with you, Jessica, just thumbs up if it's okay for the board to do this. Thumbs down, no. I don't know. thumb to the middle, to the side.
You'll need to continue on your personal life.
I don't know why it's talking to me. It's even on Do Not Disturb. I apologize, folks. I'm just gonna take it off. All right, so 1, 2, 3. Decide how you want your thumb position. Leave them up. Leave them where they're at. Down, up, side, down, side. Who said up? Cheyenne, why did you think up? Why did you choose yes? The board can do this.
Well, now I see everybody else put it down.
Remember, you're learning curve. It's not for me, sorry, to call you out. It's just, I want to utilize this as an important way to learn, right? This is usually the best way to retain information.
Just because I think that we're trying to, do the best for our students, and we want to see how each, individual school is doing. I'm thinking of maybe some comments by Scott about music and some different things of, some schools have things, some schools don't. How are those kids, maybe math affected differently if they have a music program? I guess that was just my reasoning, like for student success to be able to, instead of an overall, like, oh, the district is doing that, well, which classroom and school is doing the best and what are they doing? So that we can make sure the other schools are maybe
Okay.
following along. So for example, like one of our schools has a smart reader program, and the other ones don't, so. What's,
Yeah, so school, and we'll go to that, school versus classroom, thank you, those are some key words there. Who had their thumb down? I think everybody else did, yeah, Steve, why did you have your thumb down?
Because you're isolating a specific staff member.
Especially in smaller or smaller districts, you may be able
Yeah.
to
If there's
identify.
a way to get it layered behind staff, I mean, somewhere where, yeah, that's an HR thing, that staff member's either achieving or not. But that's not up to this board to decide, that's what you have staff members for to evaluate.
Good point. Jennifer, you had it to the side, I believe.
I did.
Yeah, why'd you do that? Why'd you decide that?
Honestly, you're gonna laugh. I tried to hone in on keywords that you were saying and how you said them.
Sure.
And so at first I was like, oh yeah, everything's cool, everything's fine with this, but then when I was honing in on words, I was like, there's something, it's a trick. And I don't know what the trick is. And then I thought, okay, it's individual classroom, there's something like that being potentially an issue. And then I'm an overthinker. So I thought, it's time to decide, so I went to the side.
No
To be
worries.
completely honest.
Oh, that's funny. I think I just, I have a theater background and singing background, so sometimes I just enunciate, and that's funny. I know I wasn't trying to. I was gonna say, pay attention to some keywords, but that's funny. I wouldn't be surprised if I said something a little more emphasized. And again, that's just my background in music and theater. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for some of you sharing. And you're absolutely right what you said, Steve. And Cheyenne, I think it's important to differentiate schools versus classroom, because here the scenario is specifically saying individual classrooms, and how that ties to teacher and school effectiveness. And I love what you said, Steve, about, well, in smaller districts especially, you'll be able to identify what classroom that is. And that's not your role, right? Again, your big picture systems thinking, because again, the day-to-day operations, that's the superintendent, but principals are the ones who are also making sure the performance of those individual classrooms and teacher and everything, the programs are effective and whatnot. That's their role, right? So that's also something to I wanted you to think about, but yeah, look at those keywords, and really that keyword is the individual classroom. If I had changed that and it said schools or grade levels, then yes, that is okay. That is your role to see. Because you do want to see, okay, how are all the levels performing, elementary versus high school versus middle school, what's the correlation there, maybe kindergarten and third grade level, because we know that's a correlation with how students are performing, right? Reading at third grade level.
To micro.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you all. I just like to do those fun little fun, I know.
Yeah. That's fine. Come for you, baby.
Exactly, and other boards tell me that's fun, I want more. We do have more, but I don't know if we'll be able to get to them. But again, you already saw this slide, right? Qualitative data is also really important too. Numbers are great, but they don't tell the full picture. So it's important to also, involve those teachers who are doing those programs if you are trying to identify student needs and whatnot, so they can tell you what's happening, what are the trends, right? All right. Standard 6 around cultural responsiveness. This one is important because I'm gonna tie it back to, again, what I asked you earlier, like, do you know who your students are? And I know that all, when I was growing up, I'll even put it into my perspective and kind of share a personal story, very short. I don't want to go on a tangent. But in my perspective, growing up in Hood River, when I was there, I was like one of the only Latino students. I remember all of us could just sit in like one table, and demographics are changing. The world is changing, folks. And so I don't know about Prineville because I don't know. You're the experts here in Prineville. But I would probably ask the superintendent, what's the makeup of your students? And it's important because when you're trying to identify and making sure you are addressing all of your students' needs, sometimes also that cultural responsiveness, knowing the diversity of your students, their backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, but also their experiences, right? Lived experiences, that's really important. And so that's essentially cultural responsiveness is just recognizing that each student is individual, right? Just like I said earlier, you're an individual, right? On the board, you have different perspectives, different backgrounds, different lived experiences. That's the same for students too. They're all individuals as well. And it is complex. And that's what makes education challenging. I'll be the first to say that. I have a master's in public policy. And I remember when I was going and deciding what policy I wanted to do, my professors were like, education, are you sure? That's like the hardest one. I was like, well, if nobody does it, and that's what I was passionate about, because I really truly believe it's important. And that's all it is. It's really just recognizing, oh, this thing really is not like.
There you go.
It's really just recognizing the cultural diversity, right? And that it comes in many facets, including social, economic, political, religious, geographical, like I mentioned, right? The geography, generational, linguistic, ethnic, and this is the research. This is what the research Tom Alsbury under the standard says: racial, sexual orientation, gender identification, and students with special needs. It's a lot. Diversity doesn't just mean the racial background. It can mean a lot of different things, and it depends, right? Who are your students? So that's what I meant when I asked you that question. Who are your students? That's what cultural responsiveness is. It's just recognizing that your students are individuals. And recognizing what and how you apply that then when you're looking at policies, right? Just putting on that lens and like asking yourselves when you're looking at policies and making decisions that are going to impact students, which all the policies do. Just remembering, okay, who are our students? What is the makeup of our students? That's all that is. Culture and climate, we talked about that, standard 7, which essentially is how you work together. Are you collaborative? Do you have those effective partnerships based on trust and respect? Do you know what balanced governance means, right? Understanding your roles and responsibilities, your authorities and limits, disengage versus overreaching and staying informed in your oversight. Your behaviors, your actions, right? I keep saying modeling the way for students. It's really important in your leadership role. How you operate, how you run meetings, right? Are your meetings marathon meetings? Are you, making sure you're setting apart, like what you said earlier, Jessica, it is important. And I know it's like, another meeting to add, right? We're really busy, but it is important to make space for that so that you can really dive deep, have conversations, especially around professional development. But even when you're looking at data too, if it's tied to the district goals within your role, have an actual monitoring session, right? Where you then bring in the teachers, the students, parents, community members. So when you are looking at progress of those goals, you're able to ask questions to those who are getting that work done, right? You don't want this, right? So healthy debates are good. It's how you, and conflict isn't bad either. I will say that. Conflict isn't bad. It's how you manage conflict. right? That's what can potentially become bad and potentially create some issues that triple, that have a ripple effect, sorry. So you don't want that, but it is definitely, you should be having, healthy debates and making sure that everyone is getting a chance to speak when you are making decisions. So then you're able to make an informed decision after you've listened to everyone, after you've seen maybe reports, et cetera. So again, creating that climate of expectation, support, mutual respect, modeling the way. Learning organization, that's essentially what you're doing right now. You're learning together. And if you do that district planning where you involve more stakeholders, that's also learning together. An analogy of this that I like to give is PLCs, professional learning communities. A lot of teachers will do those. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it's really just a space where you learn together with a group of folks who can focus on doing some reflection and discovery on whatever that topic or area may be. So work sessions, I would say, would be a place to do more learning organization work. Systems thinking, which again, probably has said this so many times, I probably sound like a broken record, so I apologize. But really systems thinking, right, that governance piece, your big picture oversight. Right, support those, you know, how you also seek out collaborative local and state, kind of what you were asking, Scott, right? How do you seek out those partnerships, but then also, as you mentioned, that local control. And that's probably more something that I would share with my legislative team, in terms of like priorities and how that can have an impact on your work. That's really important to hear. They were out here, right? Roadshow? Yeah, yep. And they will be coming back again. Yeah. Innovation and creativity. This one is essentially that you are problem solving creatively. Just, you know, again, as I mentioned, world is evolving, education is evolving. And so just thinking creatively on how to solve problems and make sure that, you know, so that it creates positive impact for your students. That's all that is. And a great time to do that, because sometimes I have boards tell me, well, we don't have time, Janet. When are we going to do that? Work sessions, make the time, build out, again, maybe at the beginning of the July organizational meeting, build out when you can have those work sessions. And that's why a board self-evaluation is a good tool, because it can help you kind of create, what are those big themes? What are those big areas we want to dive deeper in? We want to commit to as a board. It's separate than, sometimes I hear boards call them board goals. And it sometimes can get convoluted with district goals, and it's not the same, it's separate. It's more your professional development goals. And so I like to call them commitments, just to differentiate the difference between a district goal and a board goal. They're essentially commitments. What do you commit to as a board to work on throughout the year? And standard 11, which we've already been talking quite a bit about, board member conduct ethics, you have policy. Some of the policies that you have a lot of policies, right? And so you don't have to memorize all of them, but there are some that you should be commonly use. And I would say you should be familiarize yourself with. One of those is, I like to say, board's best friend, BBF. And that talks all about kind of the conduct, the ethics. I already showed you BBAA, public complaint, KL is another great one. Public comment, which I showed you too, BDDH. So there are some that you should familiarize yourself with, especially if you're newer. I would say there's about a few that I could share too that you should be familiarized with. You should know all your policies, and you can absolutely reference them all. They're, again, hosted on our website, but those are some that are commonly used. And we create fun acronyms like board's best friend to just help remember what those are. And then I showed the superintendent, right? In terms of that balanced governance, this is not what you want to have happen. And before you're asked, I'm not going to tell you which one's the board and which one's the superintendent. I've had that asked, like, who's the marshal? That's for you to decide. Essentially, what I want to make sure is that this is not what you want. You want that balance, right? Again, just another way to help you retain information. Hopefully, you know, it's a funny way. Funny, but it's important too, you know, that relationship, it's really critical. It's one of those effective partnerships that matter. It's that what versus how. Again, probably sounding like a broken record here, but you govern, you don't manage. In terms of board's roles and responsibilities, the board hires and evaluates the superintendent. You set those district goals, which we saw at the beginning. You adopt policy. You oversee the budget, and we talked a little bit about that, how you make sure there's alignment, right? That's the alignment with the goals and the policy. You monitor the district goals, or you should be monitoring those. Superintendent, on the flip side, helps hire staff, turns those goals into action, so like a strategic plan, like we mentioned earlier.
Janet, could you go back very quickly?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I was just trying to jot those down.
Yeah, and I can share these slides as well afterwards. I usually don't share them because it's a lot of slides and a lot of them are images, but I'm happy to share them as well if they're useful.
Just 30 seconds and then that.
Yeah, no, you're good. Absolutely. We're actually doing great with time.
Good, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Superintendent, I love when people take notes. I'm like, yay. Superintendent helps hire staff, turns district priorities or goals into action, implements policy and develops administrative regulations. I'm highlighting that because I'm gonna get to that here in a moment. Plans expenditures and manages the budget, and then reports on progress of the district goals. So an observation I made, and I just wanted to mention, which is totally fine, your administrative regulations policies, usually, that's something that the superintendent will do, but you have a policy around administrative regulations where the board approves them. It's not a common practice, again, right or wrong, no, it's just, I wanted to share, it's not a common practice, and the reason for that is so that you have time to do other things, the board, right? Again, it comes back to that piece of the day-to-day operations, which is the role of the board. And so administrative regulations, again, common practices for the superintendent to do that. But in this case, you approve it. So essentially kind of like policy. So again, just an observation I made. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but just something for you to think about, especially if you want to create more space where you can do more work sessions, look at data, look at things within your role. Just something for you, just food for thought there.
We just say that there's a long history of that, a long history of this board amending OSBA policy to put that back in every time you take it out. And I think that from my perspective, you know, you can get rid of that in 18 months, but it won't be while I'm still on this board.
Gotcha. And I'm not in the policy department, so. Yeah. Great. Just something I observed because I've worked with a lot of boards. So again, essentially just understanding and having a mutual understanding of your roles and responsibilities and how you support each other in that effective partnership. Standard 12, budget and financial accountability, I already kind of spoke to that. Making sure that, you know, your role is not to look at every single line item, but you should be looking at the alignment with the district goals, alignment, where is it on the budget? You can ask those questions. Where are the district goals aligned here? And usually that's in the narrative. It should be. If it isn't, that's one place where you can get that information. And then also sometimes specific pages can be called out in the budget for you to see those connections, because that is your role, to make sure there's alignment. All right, we have some scenarios. So before I get into that, questions, comments? I'm looking at this board, making sure I think we covered a lot of that.
I have a question. When it goes with the alignment portion, sometimes when questions are asked, or I know questions I've asked, like I want to better understand the organization of our schools. Like I don't know how they're laid out and who is where. And, you know, I kind of like to see that there's an even disbursement across the board in our schools, whether that be not necessarily like a specific teacher, but like Cheyenne had mentioned, reading programs, or Scott has talked a lot about music programs, things like that. And sometimes the pushback or responses, our job as the board is policy. We don't really have policies that govern the makeup of our schools. That's the superintendent's role. But how do we, as a board member or a board, make those recommendations, I guess, the right way? Because it seems me asking is for information. I'm trying to understand the structure and organization to make things like that. I would love to see a music program at all of our schools or, you know, reading programs at all of our schools, but I seem to have pushback, and I'm not trying to, you know, stick my nose where it doesn't belong scenario, but I'm also trying to understand, but how do I go about making recommendations? Is that really not my role? Because then how do we get to the alignment part once we set goals? I don't understand how we make things align because of the roles we have versus the roles the superintendent has.
Superintendent, do you have anything to add? No,
Not yet.
not yet. Yeah, so I think that's why it's important to do those district goals, even review them annually. I think that's where you can ask, you know, that's how you're able to then make the alignment. Because again, remember, even though you don't do the strategic plan, you get to see it, you get to review it. And so typically, those would be under, they could potentially be part of that strategic plan, like we're gonna expand programs, this and that. And so that's where you can see, even though it's not, you know, laid out in the district goal, it would maybe fall under one of them. And that's what's important, that's the direction, right, that you need to set. So if that's something important, how can that be a big vision statement where then the superintendent can take that statement, that district goal, and be able to, because that's essentially just directions and guidance. And then the strategic plan is where those program development or expand, or we're gonna assess all the programs, which is still the role of the board or the superintendent, but you get to see where it falls under the big umbrella of the district goal. So that's why that vision directed planning is so important. Because if that is not one of your goals, and it doesn't have to say, right, the goal shouldn't be increase program or increase music programs, right? That's too specific. If you want it to be a bit more broader, where it encapsulates that, again, it's a mission, it's a vision statement. And then underneath that, potentially a strategy, if you do want that to be something that the superintendent considers, how that could be a potential strategy underneath the district goal. And then when you look at the strategic plan, you can be like, okay, I see the alignment. So that's kind of how you can make those connections of alignment, is that you see that strategy and how it aligns to that bigger district goal. Am I making
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay.
I think, and Jessica, I don't wanna overspeak for you, one of the concerns that I had, and I think it had probably to do prior with COVID and not really understanding like what our roles are and different things, is that I know that TSPC and like a lot of rules were changed and been like, oh, you don't have to have a degree to do this, or maybe titles were changed because we don't have enough employees, not this district specifically, just like statewide.
Yeah,
A lot of the regulations were loosened.
yeah.
And so then when you go back to looking at like reading scores or math or something like that, and then, you know, there was, I think that during, at the height of COVID, you could have anybody, come in and substitute teach, and there was a lot of like criticism for that, of what was going on in the classrooms, and so trying to align,
Yeah.
if we wanna have really high academics, are our teachers and administrators like aligned to that higher standard? And it looks like, to me, and I could be off, and Scott, you can correct me, but it's kind of like a state issue, that the state.
I was just gonna
Lessen all
say,
of
this
these
aligns to kind of, you were saying,
And so
Yeah.
we have high expectations in our district to
Yeah.
want to provide the best education for our
Of
students.
course.
But then when you look at what the state has done, or
Yeah.
certain parents or constituents will be like, well, this, you know, this teacher doesn't have this or that. And so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but trying to understand how our district works and lining up, maybe that's why I answered that question.
yeah,
Incorrectly, not of micromanaging, but
yeah.
of like trying to understand how to get our, you know, our academic success back up, and making sure that people that are in those roles are the best educated for that department.
Yeah.
And maybe
I
it's
hear
just
you.
that we don't have, you know, enough people in the education system, but from my perspective, it just looks like the state took away all the accountability
Mhm.
and allowed the districts to be really loosey-goosey
Yeah.
with some of the things, and it's showing up in our testing and other things.
No, I hear you, and I knew what you were saying, that aligns kind of what you were asking, right, and I'm seeing it up here. The board, legislature, ODE, and that role and how it plays into your, right, how it can seep into your role. That's a bigger conversation, but like I said, what I hear here is that advocacy, which is your role, right, to advocate, and, again, that's something that I would love for my legislative team to hear, because the legislative priorities, that's their role, kind of, right, connecting with the Department of Ed and figuring out what are the priorities, the legislative priorities. And we have a policy committee for that too, a legislative policy committee. So this is something, but I'm glad I'm hearing it because I can share it, right, and stuff. And that's what those roadshows are for too, so that our team, the legislative, who works on that advocacy piece, which is what you're saying, can then take that back and communicate with the state. So it's not my wheelhouse. However, me listening to it, I can bring back, and I've heard it from other boards as well, and I do share it. And so it's something that it's a bigger conversation. But I just want to let you know, I hear you, and that can be complex. Education is complex, right? And so I definitely understand what you're saying there, and I understand what you were saying too, Scott, where how do we do things when we don't have, and then the community understanding too, right? But this isn't us, this is coming from the state.
Well, when they keep changing the rules and moving the goalposts, it's hard to get anything done.
Yeah, I don't work for ODE, but.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, I think it's an interesting place. OSBA itself has torn itself apart over the last year in its own leadership over the issue of where does local authority stop? Where does ODE authority start? How much power do we trade off in order to get resource?
Yeah.
And it's an unresolved issue. I don't know. It's gotten far worse than it's ever been before. I still don't know the answer to that question. And if the legislature makes a law, that's pretty straightforward.
Right,
But short of that, there's a lot of gray area as to who gets to decide.
Yeah.
And it's getting grayer.
yeah. I will take this back and share it. Again, not my wheelhouse, but this is important. I do work for OSBA, so I'll recognize that, and I can do my half by going back and sharing this message. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's all important good for me to know, and like you said, right, these were put in place because of COVID, right, a lot of them, so let's not forget about that too as well. And now how that's impacting. Cool. Perfect. Anything else? Otherwise, I have some fun scenarios for you. Yay. This is great. We have 20 minutes. I'm glad I was able to do this. And I've actually done this presentation. I definitely don't do scenarios and whatnot, like when I do the conferences and stuff, I'll do roles and responsibilities. And it's in 75 minutes, so it is doable. The nuts and bolts, I call it. So we're doing well here. All right, let's do some of these. An upset staff member, who is also a parent, approaches you, a board member, at the grocery store and asks if you can please help them with a complaint about their child's teacher. Their student's teacher has been assessing and grading them punitively, and the staff member believes it is retaliation for a tough parent-teacher conference from earlier in the year. They mentioned they have tried connecting with the teacher and have been unsuccessful, and now they feel retaliation in their own job. So this isn't a thumbs one. This is more just a reflecting and asking, what would you do?
Can I try?
You're ready? I'm gonna give you a minute to think on it, but if you're ready, absolutely.
So, well, because I've already gotten one wrong, so let me try.
Go for it.
Ask them to, meet with the teacher. That doesn't work, so then go to the principal and start at the bottom and take the steps up.
Yeah. Hey, you wanna add something?
No, I was just making sure we were doing teacher and then principal and then
Just follow procedure.
follow procedure.
Follow procedure.
Yes.
Yep.
Follow your policy, yeah.
Anybody else have anything to add? This one's complex, right? Because this is a staff member who is also a parent.
It's hard because you sympathize with their frustration,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, it's, policy is policy is policy. That's what's gonna make things, that's what sticks.
Yeah, I think it's important to note in this case, that you should, you can listen and be empathetic, like you're saying, right? You wanna be careful to not say, go file a complaint,
but you can absolutely say, we have a policy, it's to go to the district around, public complaints. You know, you're not the first stop. I think that's important as well, that there's a procedure, and you can just leave it at that, right? You can listen and then say there's the, because sometimes they'll just go potentially on a rant, right? And then you gotta figure out when to interject and just be like, oh, you know, again, be empathetic, and then let them know that there's a process and procedure for that. But don't say, you know, go file a complaint. Just be careful of that, though.
I do think that last line raises concern about they feel retaliation in their own job. I assume that means the teacher is feeling retaliated against somehow.
That's what I was wondering.
And I would say as a board member, you would have a duty at that point to call the superintendent and say, hey, I had a conversation at the grocery store with a teacher that's concerned about
Yeah, that's true.
about harassment or retaliation, and you might want to follow up on that. And then just let the superintendent run from there.
Thank you, Scott, for saying that. Absolutely. Another thing too is, and this is about setting clear expectations around board operating agreements is a good time for that as well, to be like, hey, this is just wanting to let you know, just like information, right? Similar, so if you're hearing rumblings, right, on the community, and thank you for saying that, yep, it's complex, and I do that, so good catch. Is so that way you could just let, you know, superintendent, and vice versa, I tell the superintendent too, if you hear rumblings that something's gonna trickle and it's gonna be potentially asked, let the board know as well. That's a great example of setting a clear expectation where when you hear something, you're just gonna FYI, just share it with the superintendent, let him handle it, right? And if you hear something that is within the role of the board and they need to be aware of it, letting them know too, so they aren't caught off guard. Because what neither of you want is to have surprises, right? We want to avoid those surprises. And that's gonna build that partnership, that trust, that respect. So thank you for sharing that, Scott. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all of you for sharing your answers there. And again, you have that policy, it's KL. And you have even an AR, administrative regulation, so the procedure, there's the steps. There's even the steps too, if there's a complaint against the board, right? Or a board member or the chair or vice chair, whatever, you know, whatever it may be. You have it clearly laid out in your policy. And then you have the form, right? There's the form, so if there is a complaint. All right, this one I may have already given you the answer if you were listening, so maybe it's a little bit of a pop quiz. A board member posts a question on Facebook asking for input. Oh wait, no, this one's different. A board member posts a question on Facebook asking for input on the high school math teacher's behavior and action. She states that her daughter is upset because of the way the teacher runs this board member is now utilizing their parent hat, right? But they're a board member. She states that her daughter is upset because of the way the teacher runs her classroom and wants to know if others are having the same concern. She makes herself available for questions by text, email, and social media. She goes to the superintendent and shows them the concerns, wanting something to immediately change. She also emails other board members for their input. She tells the superintendent, she or he or they, you can put, you know, tells the superintendent that if they do not deal with it, she will bring it up at the next board meeting. I can give you time to reflect. What are your thoughts on this?
Is this an up or down? I'm just kidding.
Well, let's start with this question. What's right? Is there anything here that is done right?
No.
I see a lot of faces, no.
Nothing is wrong.
Your first sentence is.
Yeah.
Ooh, a board member posts a question on Facebook asking for input on the high school. What's wrong with that first sentence?
Again, what you said earlier of, even though you're, yes, I'm a parent, everybody sees you as a board member.
Right.
You're, that role never unfortunately leaves you.
Right, yeah, that's true. What else? This is not tricky, this is just a learning tool.
You're isolating a staff member.
Math teacher, right?
Well,
If people know who that student is or that person is, yeah,
I
good point.
mean, we always have that problem of being a parent and a board member. You're never not a board member, but you have to be a parent. So
Right,
to me, this errs in every respect, because any other parent, you say, go talk to the teacher.
mhm,
You tell this board member, do the same, go talk to the teacher, if you
Yep.
don't like the teacher's response, go to the principal.
yep,
Work your way up the system.
yep,
And so if you just stick to what would you tell an ordinary person to do, then it all becomes obvious what you're supposed to do.
right, yeah, good point.
The problem is if you go as a parent
Mhm.
to the teacher And the teachers union can come back on you and say, well, you were using your influence as a board member to intimidate the teacher.
Yeah, that's
So
where
then
it
what
can
do
get
you do?
complex and convoluted, right? Oh.
Mhm.
Yeah, but in this scenario, though, you're absolutely right, there's a lot, like, you shouldn't be getting input, right? On, and then showing the superintendent. Another thing here that I wanna call out is emailing other board members for their input.
I just didn't get that part.
You're like, I'm still getting there. Making themselves available, you know, so that you have to be very careful in terms of serial meetings, like we talked before. Even though it's just an individual, right? You're not going to 3 at a time. That can still be potentially considered a serial meeting because you don't want to, you know, essentially you are sharing the same information just at separate times. So you can do it, right? It's not technically a serial meeting, but it's not a best practice. It's not a best practice because, and especially not a best practice if it's regarding, aside from this scenario, regarding something on like the agenda. Let's say there's something on the agenda and you're like, oh, Jennifer, did you see what's on the agenda? Just wanted to check with you, like, you know, this and that, and start discussing some things. And then you come to the meeting, and sometimes it can be apparent that you maybe had side conversations and sometimes not. So you're supposed to have that's why you have open public, your meetings are open to the public, I mean, not open to the public, but why you have those meetings, because you're supposed to discuss them together as a board, right? Everybody needs to hear it, and you should be able to then, deliberate. Anything else? Jessica, do you have anything? I wanna make sure we don't forget.
Well, I would just, I think, reiterate what Cheyenne asked you, then what does your role look like? Because when you go trying to follow those exact steps as a board member, you look as though you're trying to use your authority.
I think you
Cheyenne asked
expressed-
that. I don't think that it really got clarified on how you do handle situations. Obviously, this is not the way to get on social media, but as a board member, how would you handle this situation?
Right, well, like you said, follow the procedure, right? And then there's that concern like Cheyenne brought up. I think it's important to say that it is, you know, you are coming as a parent, right? You can explain that, just like, and I know, like I said earlier, just because you say that doesn't mean, right, they're still gonna hold you at that standard that you are a board member. But then there are those additional steps for a reason too, right? So if it's not handled at like the first step, then you can take it to the principal, take it to the superintendent, right? And eventually then it will be addressed, right?
Well, there are-
That's something unfortunate, like, right, I can't say, you know, that they'll never, even if you just say, I'm not, right, I'm coming here as a parent, they'll still think of you as coming as a board, right, or using your board authority.
I think there's a couple other practical things you can do. You can always send your spouse, that's really helpful, rather than yourself. If you can't do that, then another option is to invite the principal to sit in on that meeting.
Ooh.
Because then you have a third party witness that you weren't trying to intimidate or do
Mhm.
something inappropriate. And you state right up front, I'm here as a parent, not as a board member. I've
Mhm.
asked the principal to come with me to make sure that this is a fair conversation. I
Yeah,
have these concerns, I want to express them.
Yeah.
And then, you know, good, at least as good as it's gonna get for protecting
You
against
tried.
inconvenience.
right,
You made an attempt to make it about.
So at that point in time, since you do have the principal there, you skip the principal, if it doesn't go
Yeah, well,
anywhere,
if it doesn't go anywhere,
they
then
just,
you can always appeal to the person that sat through the meeting, but it's a pretty short appeal at that point.
right, okay.
So Scott, can I share, I have made this mistake, I should share more in public. There was a concern I had with one of my children and, I wasn't sure what to do in this situation, so then I attached, the superintendent, and then I got blowback because that's the principal's boss.
Right.
So like, no matter what I did, like, it was with a teacher. And then, so if I invited the principal, but, so anyway, it's a learning curve.
Right.
And I really appreciate your
It is.
thing of another parent, the other parent taking that on. That's a really excellent point. Because there are so many layers and things are so deep that you also don't wanna like, attaching the superintendent is a big deal for like the principal, cause you have to go through the steps of like the teachers and the.
You just bypass the step, yeah.
Yeah, and if you bypass the step, it looks really bad on, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
and this is why professional development and what we're doing tonight is so important, right? So you can ask those questions, you can share, you've been on here way longer, right, than a lot of the other folks here. And that's learning organization, taking it back to those standards, just so you can apply it. That's exactly what you're just doing right now, right? You're learning together.
I mean, I wanted to say to you, to Jessica in particular, because you have younger kids, your children are important.
Yes.
You don't give up your responsibilities as a parent just because you become a board member.
Mhm.
So it's more difficult to manage, but you do have an obligation to be a parent first and foremost and raise a good kid. So I certainly support, whatever, find the best balance, but don't quit advocating for your kid.
Mhm. Mhm. That's your parent hat, we call it, your board hat, your parent hat, right? Because again, you're elected, but you're volunteer positions, and a lot of you, may have kids at the district. It's not always black and white, right? And like you said, I like what you said there, it's that balance.
Well, and there's an unfair standard. If my kid is rotten, then I'll get blamed from the whole community for raising a rotten kid as a school board member. But if I make efforts as a school board member to raise a really good kid, then I'm interfering in the system. I mean, my duty is to raise good
But
kids
dude,
and across the whole
yeah.
district, including mine.
The problem is, and there's a lot of pressure on your children and their kids.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're gonna make mistakes and they're gonna do things that, normal, if you're not in a public role,
Yeah.
those kids probably wouldn't be called out as much as, just, we watched the Santa Claus, over Christmas and,
Yeah.
like that, it came to mind like, oh, you wanna let your kids try and grow up and be kids too, but it's just a fine line,
Yeah.
to walk. So thank you, Scott, for.
Absolutely.
I
Like
think
that.
Scott's right in finding that balance piece. I think it's hard when you deal with so many different entities between the community, the schools, all those within the district. Everyone, I think, comes at you with different roles, and they may believe something different than this person in this role. And so I agree with Scott. I will never lose my hat as being a parent, nor will I ever, not advocate for my kid, but it definitely is a balance to figure out how to do that correctly with all that you have to deal with in different roles.
Yeah, another thing too, that can be difficult as well, right, especially if you do have students at the district, is making sure that, whatever that concern may be, how is it impacting all students, right? And not bringing in maybe a potential concern that maybe is just, you're aware of it because your student is there, but how is that impacting all students, right? Because that is your role, is to ensure all students. And that can be really hard as a parent. I mean, I can definitely, be very transparent here. That's hard to do, but your role is to look at all students, right? And so not to bring in, being very careful of that balance of not to bring in just because you have further insight potentially into the district, or you hear something from your kiddo or whatnot, to not let that influence be the only influence when you are making decisions, right? I'm not saying that that's happening, but I'm just saying in general, in terms of your governance, that's also that balance, and that can be tricky. But it is important that you do remember all your students and who are your students, right? Including your students, your kiddos as well. I did want to just put that in there as well. Okay, where are we with time? Ooh, we have time for maybe one more.
She does.
One more. Oh, that's a good one. Hold on, let me see what other one I have, because we talked about interruptions. So let's do this a little bit. A board member might have an opportunity for two more. A board member shows up to an elementary school teacher's classroom and says they are there to observe silently student learning in classrooms and check on overall staff and student morale. Can the board do this? Thumbs up, wait. Wait. No, you're good. Can the board do this? Yes. No, thumbs down. I'm not sure, or it depends, maybe. All right, 1, 2, 3, choose.
Well, you quantify the change.
We have, almost all of you are to the side, it depends. And the scenario, maybe there is some more stuff that needs to be there. Why did you say it depends? Who hasn't spoken? I think all of you have done a really good job of speaking, so whoever wants to share.
Why'd you say that's me?
Thanks, Steve. Let me just take that.
I always wanna make sure I let everybody speak, right? Everybody get an opportunity.
This is a hard one.
Mhm.
For multiple reasons.
Let me go.
No, I'll do it. I thought a board member, if they ahead of time, cleared it with the teacher and the principal and stuff, could go. Like, I thought that was a good thing. I used to work in the school district. And so I was in IA, EA, whatever. And so I only remember maybe one time somebody showed up, but I think it was important that a board member does see, well, how things are going, what kind of teachers, what can we do to help teachers, what do they need? I was in the SPED department, and so we usually didn't see a lot of people in there. And so I thought this would be a good thing. Well, in hindsight, it kind of came back and got thrown back at us that it wasn't a good thing. So I'm really iffy on this one. Like, I thought it was a good thing, but then there was a whole bunch of chatter that it was not a good thing, that people thought we were checking up on them and micromanaging them, and we're trying to do things for whatever reason, instead of the good intention of, really, I just want to see what your classroom's like. Like, I want
Yeah.
to observe and see what we can do to help you and what you need and those kinds of things. So what I took up as what was supposed to be a good thing, kind of came back and, I don't want to say bit us, but that's
Yeah.
kind of why I'm struggling with this one.
Yeah, so this is what I always, so when board members come to me to ask for questions or clarification, or even the board administrative professional board secretary, I always say, what does your policy say? So you actually have a policy on visits to schools, and it's under policy BG or slash GBD in your case, visits to schools. So school visits by board members will be regarded as informal expressions of interest in school affairs and not as inspections or visits for supervisory or administrative purposes. Official, so really the key thing is informal versus official. Those are the key words there. Official visits by board members will be carried on only under board authorization with the full knowledge of staff, including the superintendent, principals, and the supervisors. Board members representing the board on committees are on official visits under board authorization. So really the difference between, so I guess in your case, did you think that was an informal versus because you were going in to observe like the classroom or like the program, right? Or just,
No, I had staff members say, hey, you guys should really come visit the
oh, staff
classrooms.
members invited you.
And
Okay.
so I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I brought it up, and then the backlash happened. So I never went.
Gotcha. So I would say in that case, if a staff member were to, I would just connect with the superintendent, right? Just to let them know, and then make sure, is that okay? Or is that an official visit? And if so, then it needs to be approved by the board as stated in your policy, right? So something that came across too, in terms of, the hats, wearing different hats if you're a parent. I did have a board member once ask me like, oh, what if I'm just going in for a parent teacher conference? Folks get nervous, or I'm going in to help volunteer at my student's classroom, right? They're thinking I'm a board member and I'm going in, as soon as I walk in, they know I'm a board member, right? That's a little different. And I would say you don't have to get board authorization, but what I did, what that board member decided to do is just let the superintendent know, just a heads up. I'm going to be into the building because I'm volunteering for my kiddo's classroom, or, I'm going in for a charity conference. Again, you don't have to, but it is nice. It's just a nice little heads up. And so that board member's like, I'm still just gonna let them know, so then I don't get any, questions later on, just address it that way. So to answer your question around that scenario, it does depend, right? Official versus unofficial, and how do you define that? And then what does your policy say?
I did one on the other school board and I was on, I got invited in, I get how people think it's important, but it's so disruptive. Those kids just scatter and they don't, at least when I was there, no, there's no way that was how there's no way that's how that normal school classroom was operates. Because somebody new
See what
is.
you're saying.
Doesn't matter if me
They
or
get
somebody else.
excited.
It's just something's off, something's different in the classroom. I'm like, there's no way that this is how this classroom operates normally. And so that, I don't know, it's,
Giving disruption.
yeah, it's just creating a
That's a good
disruption
point.
instead of, I don't know. I understand the importance of it and how people think it's important. but
Yeah,
I don't know if you're really truly getting a actual insight by inserting yourself in there and causing a disruption. Cause I don't think that's an actual profile of what that classroom is probably like. That's my opinion.
You
Yeah.
can though, and I'll tell you, a few years ago, we were struggling with Pioneer because Pioneer's graduation rate was just really, really poor. As graduation rates sometimes are for private schools. And so I couldn't quite figure out why our interventions weren't working. And finally, the principal asked me to come over and walk through the school. So I did come over to his invitation and I sat through a couple classes. And I really understood better what we were up against and what the struggles were at that point, and came back and became a board advocate for more resources to get that school's graduation up. And as you all know, we've done amazing work over there since then. I wouldn't have been doing that had I not seen for my own eyes what happened. So I'm a huge advocate for board visits. You have to go through all this rigmarole, but at the end of the day, it can change your perspective.
Mhm.
If you can make time to do it and do it within the process.
yeah, I think, you know, if you discuss it, right, especially let's connect it to the big picture and your role. If there's like a district goal, right, let's say there is a new program being implemented or whatnot, going and observing that program, right, and seeing how progress, that's another way to check on progress. It doesn't always have to be a data report, right, to speak to what you're saying, Scott. Dr. Drainich, do you have anything to add, or is this, you know, what you would want to know, especially for unofficial visits, just a heads up from the board?
I am supportive of this policy and the way we have attempted to interpret it, but it's been a bit of a source of controversy for us. But I would like to see visits to classrooms continue.
I think, Steve, too, one thing, like when you're a parent, cause I still have a kindergartner. And so, the kids aren't, if you're in there every day, like with a couple of my kids, not recently, prior, I did a lot of like the reading groups and stuff. So the kids, they know you and they know if you go into that, like, you volunteer for reading every Tuesday or whatever, you just become part of the landscape. I think it's probably definitely harder, for board members to come in and maybe they don't have a student. I feel like when I go into help with reading and stuff in my daughter's class, like, they don't even notice that I'm there because they just know, oh, reading group, you get group A and the teacher gets group B, and it's just part of the normal system. But I do agree that when you have people just come into a classroom, it definitely disrupts their behavior. Like when you make a phone call and your kids are taking that, you know, they don't act the same way, so.
Yeah, and I think that was a really good observation, Steve, to note. Again, why it's important to have these professional development and to have space for that. So it is 6:02, sorry, I went over 2 minutes. And that was basically it. So I'm just gonna wrap up if that's okay in like 2 or 3 minutes here. But again, right, having those communication protocols, this is a sample. I know I mentioned it a few times, that board operating agreement. This is kind of a sample of that. I recommend it just be a one pager. You do it together with the superintendent and basically kind of identify what are some key agreements that you need to discuss. And we start usually with big themes, and then we can help you kind of figure out what are some specific agreements. We're happy to facilitate it. Otherwise, we can tell you how to do it, the process, and then you can facilitate it yourself as well, you know. And then board expectation, the board, this is an important piece, board superintendent operating agreement. The board sets some expectations for the superintendent, just jots them down. And then superintendent also gets the opportunity to set some expectations for the board. And that's what I mean about clear expectations. And it can mean a variety of things, right? So that's how we start with big themes and then trickle down into, okay, these are the big buckets. What are some agreements that fall within that? And we have a lot of samples of agreements that could fall underneath a variety of big topics like email correspondence, communication, collaboration, you name it. So that's that sample. Now you got to see it, because I know I mentioned it a few times. A couple of tools and resources, and then I'm done, I promise. This is our website. Utilize, as a member, you have access to a lot of resources. So go to your OSBA login. You should have a login, and if you don't, let me know, and I'll get you connected with the right folks to make sure you're able to access your login information, so you can get access to board operating agreements,
webinars, a whole variety of resources, our roles and responsibilities booklets. And then there's our department if you want to find or contact me or other departments. Also our trainings and events, we do 2 a year, in terms of professional development summer board conference, and then also annual convention. I'm the program planner for that and my team. So essentially develop the content, who's gonna be the speakers, et cetera. They keep me busy over there. And then, this is news clips just to keep you up to date, what's happening, in Oregon, and then also, nationwide as well. Upcoming event that's coming up is Bonds and Ballots. So aside from our summer board and annual convention, we have other conferences as well. The next one, February 16th, is the Bonds and Ballots, which is held by our communications department. And then that's my team, there I am, and then, our board development administrative assistant, who keeps us all in check, Jennifer, Nelson, really important team member. And then additional sources, right, departments, I'm the board development team, but we have legal services, I talked about policy services, communication, we talked about legislative services, right? So if I don't have the answer, you're more than welcome to come to me as your first stop, and then if I don't have it, I'll, guide you to maybe how you can get that answer. And then we have a bunch of committees, the Legislative Policy Committee I mentioned. We do have some newer caucuses. We have the Oregon School Board Members of Color Caucus, most recently, the Rural School Board Members Caucus, and really excited about that. And then the Oregon LGBTQIA2S+ School Board Members Advisory Committee. So we're also constantly growing. We started with the Color Caucus and we've expanded, which is great. And I love that we have the rural. And that's it. Thank you all for everything you do for the students here at Crook County School District. Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure. I hope that you learned something. I hope that we were able to achieve some of those key takeaways. And again, the learning doesn't stop, right? Keep continuing and figuring out what's next for your board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Janet. It's worth noting that we're too big to be a part of the rural schools caucus. I mean, you can't imagine how many tiny little districts there are in this state. We are actually one of the bigger ones, so we're way above the cutoff.
Yeah.
I think the cutoff's 2,500 students. So.
Great. I'll have to look at I'll have to look at that.
It's
It's on our
smaller,
website.
a lot
though.
smaller than we are.
Yeah, what is it here in Kirk County?
3,700 is mine.
3,700. Yeah, I looked it up because I was curious. I was like, I've never been to Prineville, and I was like, is it smaller or bigger than Hood River? And then Hood River's 24,000 population now, currently with the census, and you're at like 10,000?
Well, but we serve our whole county, which is 22,000 plus,
Okay,
the eastern portion of Deschutes County.
oh, gotcha, okay.
Quite a good size.
So just Prineville, but not Crook County as a whole,
Right.
yeah, gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, if our school in Brothers, we've got a school in Brothers, which is in extreme east of Deschutes County. We've got a school in Playa, right?
Uh-huh,
So in the winter, they can't get to each other without coming back through Prineville and making a big U. Because there's no
gotcha,
road to connect it to.
yeah.
Because it's closed by snow.
Gotcha, yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I was born and raised in Oregon, but I'm learning the geography of Oregon, I'm astonished, I was in Burns last year, and I was like, I'd never been there.
Yeah, I love glory days.
Oh, did that, so there, oh, I wish I would have known, but I was just there for a night,
Small it is.
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, that's the most amazingly sized jug
Yeah,
I've ever
I'm
seen.
constantly learning too.
I didn't need one that big.
All right, I'm gonna head out.
I was gonna tell you, Janet, when I was at Oregon State, I grew up in Road River.
Oh, okay.
And every single person thought I was from Hood River.
Joel.
Really?
Yeah, because nobody else
Please
lived in
call
Hood
it.
River.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And, everyone's like, oh, you're from Hood River, and I've never been to Hood River. I mean, I went maybe like 5 years ago, my sister really likes it. So. Yeah,
Yeah. I know, and like I said, it's grown, the development is
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, we stayed in the old, my sister and I went with my mom a couple years ago, to that big old historic hotel.
Oh,
It is so.
The Columbia River
So
Gorge,
beautiful.
oh, it's
Yeah.
so beautiful,
It was
and during
so
Christmas,
gorgeous.
they do a bunch of lights, I didn't get to go this year because of the weather and I was traveling. But I look forward to that every year, the lights.
It's beautiful.
It is, yeah, they do weddings there too. I was a wedding planner for a bit and got to do a wedding. Yeah, when I was still figuring out what my career was gonna be. I started in journalism and public relations, and it just wasn't my cup of tea, and then I discovered education is where it's at.
Dr. Yucca, how long is the break you guys are taking? It's not on the agenda. I just want to make sure I'm back in time.
How long is this? 5 minutes?
Five would be my guess.
Okay, I'll be back.
Bye, Jessica. It's nice meeting you as well.
Thank you.
Robert Taft.
Eric was working on that, I believe.
Here is your clicker.
Oh.
I know her. I put that one. No, thank you. I appreciate it as well. Just a minute. Head off. Enjoy the rest of your meeting, everyone.
Thank you, Janet, very much.
Of course, no problem. My pleasure.
I'm kind of, coffee was like, structure and coffee. Oh, gosh.
High octane.
Woo. You might see me.
That's why I only have one cup.
Wow, yeah. Mhm. God bless whoever made it. Okay, we're having fun.
Stopping here. Should we pick this off for a second?
Yeah.
I could also take that off for a few. Should be kicked on. Let's do it. So it's 74. Yeah. It gets warm. Leland gets mad at me when I adjusted them.
I don't blame him.
Actually, I don't.
I would be too, Leland.
But there's reasons why people don't have controls to their thermostat.
You put one of those, little cases around it with the key.
That would be me.
I have a funny story to tell you about mods and Jim Bates at some point.
Oh,
So,
How are you?
so Jim wanted the mods over at Pioneer. I'll tell you what. It's nothing bad, but that's fine. It's, yeah, it seems to like, the auto is not doing this. Well, I think it's because all of a sudden you throw 15, 20 people in there, right, it's stuff. Math and, this is, we got it, but that's. They come and look at what your office games. And this too. I don't know, they come and look at my office probably 4 or 5 times. Hey, Leland, what I'll do is, because they'll discuss some board goals, and then let's say 5:45. Leland and Anna wanna.
So I'll drink coffee. I'll drink hot coffee. Once you that where I sit at my computer, I'll switch to.
This is just an extension of this.
She's smelling.
No, yes.
I'm showing her team. You know, I kind of put.
I looked at this and tried to match it with these three.
I looked it up.
We just answered.
Because I thought it was kind of-
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
I
it'll
know.
flow.
Oh, yeah, I'm not a big tea drinker and all the spice and all that. You know,
but you're gonna go with this.
But I found that
Hi.
and it's really well.
Leland, are you feeling better?
Yeah.
Good.
Fine.
Well, remember I had jury duty with somebody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The grand jury is way more low side.
Yeah, that's what Lincoln had said.
Great.
It is.
Actually consistent even the count on it.
Oh, well, ours was. Yeah. In-
like the one we sessions better.
Oh.
In the sense where it's getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Oh, you can. Do you wanna try it too, Jen? I have another one. If you have an extra, it's already.
No.
I'm not kidding you. This is like great.
Yeah.
You
It's
should.
high octane.
Who made it? Eric, did you make this?
You know,
Weather.
Is it terrible?
yeah.
Hmm.
It's hot, not like temperature.
It's not real, it's back up.
That's not gonna get some, but.
We can try it.
Not that it's terrible.
It's not terrible, it's just like truck driving coffee.
Yeah, that'll keep you up all night long.
She felt it was better that she didn't know. So I don't know if she didn't.
I'll switch to tea and I'll drink tea, so. I'll switch to that.
Paper do, and we could video.
Oh, geez.
There's the flags.
Like a selfie type of it.
It was so weird. Done, turned in, so was my video.
They're kids, but I need better. I have all sorts of things.
That's what I try here.
He's like credit.
I went
for
like
things.
this and I'm
I
like.
like it. I know some video making. I'm gonna try tomorrow. I was like.
Yeah, totally.
I was.
So I ran.
I will. That'll be my next. That'll be my next word.
It's hard. That's what you just said.
Oh, it does? Cool. Hello.
Joe, hey, Rob. Yeah, thanks for helping us out.
Yeah.
Did you do it? How you doing? How are you? Everyone's good, Al?
Oh, going.
So you drive over?
Yeah, drove over. Yeah, it was bad. I was down in Eugene. Yeah. I live in Vermont.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so my son goes to Oregon State.
Okay.
He has a professor who's currently taking a class for my golf test.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, so I'm like, is he done? I'm like,
We crossed
no way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what are the odds? I mean, Casella says that's
Yeah,
it.
not that big.
Two of the same, yeah.
Yep. All right. Oh, thanks. Here's your copies.
Oh, I probably. Steve always leads away on that.
And where you'd like me to sit? Okay.
Are you starting with the presentation?
Yeah, I'll do the like moving slides first. What timeframe? look?
You've got as much time as we need to get everything lined out, Rob.
Okay.
I thought you said about 45 minutes to an hour was what you were thinking, so that's tentatively what we're planning, but give or take what you need. So
Yeah.
Okay. I'll hand the floor over to you, Rob, if you want to get going.
Yeah, yeah, anytime, whenever you're ready.
I think that's a hard stop.
Sorry, cut it off.
All right.
Get up and leave.
Right, go forward. This slide one. Okay. So, the survey's complete and had a lot of great feedback. And, a good turnout too. We had, over 240 people, participate in the survey. And you have copies of this, so I'm not gonna spend a ton of time, mostly just gonna go over it and highlight some things that stood out to me as I've looked at your data compared to other districts I've looked. So, feel free to stop me at any time with any questions. And it's possible to, sort this in different ways and so if you have a particular, as you think at this and look through the data, you could say, hey, Rob, what are the people that have been here, 2 to 3 years or 4 to 6 years, or anyone like less than 10 versus people over 10? I can do any of those sorts. Just if you like list the question you want to know, then that gives me time to kind of put it together. So it's, and so I can do that for you. I wouldn't do it right now, but I can get that back to you. Okay, so on this first slide, this stood out to me in that the majority of people have been here more than 10 years. So you have a lot of invested people in the community that participate. So that is atypical. Usually there's, that breakdown is more evenly distributed. In the culture, these are the 5 elements of culture that we look at, the research points to. And from this one, it looks like it's fairly even, but if you get into this data a little bit, what you'll notice is that
third and fourth bullet, listening and communicating effectively and providing supports to students. You'll see the number one means that people, when they rated it, 67 people rated providing support to students is number one. And listening, communicating effectively was also, so those two were near the highest. And that's interesting to me because it emphasizes that people who took the survey want a leader that's gonna be engaged with students. Don't always see that. So that's important piece of data. And so the way we use this data is as you are looking at the applicants and as a screening team, because the screening team has access to this data as well. They'll, actually, this is public, so we'll put this on your website. You can do that or on the superintendent search page. Yeah.
Sure.
So as you look at the candidates and as we design questions, we'll design questions that get at some of the highlights of the survey. Okay. The next is, the ability to make quality decisions is really important for a superintendent and an effective leader. And so these are the elements of decision-making science. And the two highest ones are common sense, sound reasoning, and identifying the problems to solve. If you notice that, you've got 93 people said, yeah, we want common sense. And we're looking for someone that's gonna start with, what's the problem we're trying to solve? So those are, all those things are important, but those things rose to the top. In their area of leadership, this was much higher than most districts as well, is that middle one, having a strong vision, mission, and values. 117 people, over half the people that participated ranked that as number one. So this speaks to the element of having a strategic plan that's in place, that's leading the work of the district is important to look for and ask about as we design questions and look at that. So I've seen on your web, that you do have a strategic plan. I haven't dove into like how well, a lot of districts have one, but it's not really implemented, so that's just something that as you hire a new superintendent, we're gonna wanna, based on this feedback, make sure that that's an important thing. And obviously that's something the board has a lot of say in the development and so. All right, next question is about the area of management. This is fairly balanced, but with your community, they're really looking for organization, communication, and follow through. That's the highest rankings I've seen on one of these community surveys. So this is gonna be important as you look at, paperwork for that person, is it organized? Is it, how did they lay out their application? All those sorts of things are attention to detail that you're gonna wanna look at. So, communication, follow through, again, these are things that we can design questions around and as we do reference checking, we can reference check on those topics as well, so.
Rob, on that first bullet, you can't say for certain that they were emphasizing organization. It may have been communication because that ended up higher on your first slide. And that may be what they're responding to.
Yeah, there's some of that, how people interpret the question to it. There may have been like, oh, communication really stands out, I like that one. But those elements of being able to be organized and communicating and following through, they do form a family, those skill sets, we found. So, I know the paying attention to details is also related to that, but.
And it's a low response.
But I think the communication part and the follow through is different than some of those other things. When it comes to culture, the number one, we're looking at the green bar is what people say that the district needs to work on right now, and coming together and work as a united team is, again, a really strong response, which is, again, atypical. You don't necessarily see that one as jumping out as like, let's do that. So there's a sense that that's something you're looking for, someone that has experience or been successful at bringing groups together that may be different. And some of the themes that came out in the open response is, kind of verified that as well. So that's gonna be important. And then, this part of the survey, people had a choice. All of these things are important for leadership, but which ones are the most important or looking for in your next leader? And these are ranked by the ones that got the most clicks. So working to build relationships, and here's that connection to staff and students again. So that theme of someone that is, it works. Some people are good with numbers and buildings and budgets, and other people are more people type leaders, connectors. And I would say based on this data, that's more the type of person that people said is what you're looking for. Ability to lead, facilitate, implement school and district and state initiatives was important. And then also being able to have difficult conversations. We look at usually the first set there, maybe the top 3 to 5, so. And then this is, I believe, the last slide, management. So everything on this list is important, top 5 in the management arena, because we know when that being an effective superintendent is a balance of leadership, getting people go in a direction, and then management, making everything work smoothly. So it's a combination, right? And the most effective superintendents are able to balance both of those skill sets well. And so in this area, transparent, open, honest communication ranked far and away number 1, followed by effectively supporting staff in their work with students who are struggling behaviorally. So behavior issues and supporting staff with that. So there's that staff connection theme again. And then, dealing with difficult parents and students. And there isn't any district that's not experiencing that, right? So that's a common thing that everyone's trying to get better at. So questions about the community survey?
I had
Yeah.
one question. I noticed, on the first email that you sent, there was several, people listed. Some didn't have responses, and when I got this one, I'm assuming that, there was some people left off
Yeah.
that didn't have responses, so we only vote on the people that.
Yeah,
gave
that
the
fills out,
response.
and the reason, and we're gonna go to that next, going to the electing who's gonna be on the committee. And the reason why I included just the ones who responded is I had sent, multiple emails, so I figured if they're not responding, then if there's a lot of people that want to be on the committee, so let's pick, my recommendation, select from the people that responded with some sort of response as to why they wanted to serve on.
Rob,
Because
I
we
have
end
a
up-
question. Oh,
Yes.
did you say the top 3 to 5 of each of these? I know that's what our community is looking for, but are we gonna gear questions towards what the community is looking for so we can see what their responses would be? Are you gonna utilize, is that what you're utilizing these for? Or is this for us to know when reviewing applications?
Yeah, all of the above. We'll,
Oh, okay.
it's definitely to look as you're looking at application, as you're reading reference letters and this is the same kind of speech I give to the screening committee when I meet with them, is you have this data, and as you're screening, be looking for things that might line up with themes you might be seeing. So yes, for that. And then also, we're gonna put together a bank of questions for you. And remember, you've got a first round of interview and then a second round, so you'll see the final candidates multiple times. And so there'll be opportunities, obviously we have different sets of questions for every time you talk to them. So,
Right.
so we'll design questions that get at some of these themes, or we'll actually present you with options and then you'll select which ones you want to use. But that's how that will work.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So is everyone ready to move on to the nominations and selecting who's gonna be on the screening committee?
So I do have a question on a couple of the names on our list. Just to clarify, we have a couple of, I guess, extra either school employees of some sort, whether they're administrator, teachers, what have you. Are we able to nominate those even though we had somebody select administrators classified that? Can we
Yeah, that's a great
nominate
question.
anyone from that list, or do we need not pick up anyone that's in
So
some of these other groups?
So I wanted to present that to you all because one of the things when, there were people, we know that Jay, you talked about, based on the board's direction, give us 3 from every area. And then you got those to me. And the survey went out as well, right? And, I got some feedback from people that took the survey. And what they said was, hey, I may be a staff member, but I'm also a community member. I'm also a parent. And so for transparency, I wanted to include all of those on that list so that, you know, you have a choice. It says what role that they're serving in. And that way, if, the board feels like, you know, the employees, there are already 9 people on the employee side that are participating. So we want to go just with people that are not employees. You can do that, or if there are some that they nominated, but they weren't selected by the employee group. So it's,
Okay.
just want to include everyone that said they're interested, gave a response, even if the role may not have been only parent community. And the way the survey was designed, in that first question, you could only check 1. So even if you had multiple roles, so that's why I included those additional.
Okay, thank you.
So I've seen there's a lot of different ways to nominate and select people, to committee, you know, I've worked with districts a lot of different, and this way I found to be fairly effective and time efficient is basically you have people in front of you, you have their responses. And what I would recommend is that someone nominate someone to be on a committee. If that person receives the second, discuss, and then call for a vote. And if there's 3 votes for that person, they get the first slot. And then that way, you're not discussing everyone who turned something in, and you're just voting and select questions. Like, see Scott.
I'd like to propose a different process, because I think that sounds like a whole lot of public grading of people that I don't want to. Could we have each board member, we need 6 total.
6
So
total.
could we have each board member come up with a first and a second choice, nominate your choice, and then create a slate that we could all vote on in the end? The 6th person could be selected by the superintendent. And that would give us 6 again.
Just like on a piece of paper.
So we would just write them down, then we'll go ahead and read them out. And if you've got a duplicate, go to your second choice, because we might have some duplicates. But see if we could just get to a slate of 6 then without having to actually go through.
Yeah, you can, that's.
Debatable part, right?
Yeah.
Because community members.
Because that sounds
Yeah.
miserably painful. So that was
Yeah.
another way we could do it that would make it very fast and efficient.
Is that an,
I would be okay with that.
Yeah. is that a motion?
Do that, or
It's just a suggestion for process, however we want to do it. Would that be an okay way with you, Madam Chairman?
Yeah, so are we, I think that's great, Scott, but is there a way? So what, do you just read your top, you read your 2, Steve reads his 2, Jennifer reads hers 2, Cheyenne
Yeah,
then, or what are you thinking? And then if we have 5 different people, we just, so like if you have the same person as Steve, Steve would then name his second one, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's why
Okay,
we're
got
gonna
it.
rank to,
Okay.
maybe we rank to the top 3, rather
Thinking
than
we
the
should do
first
3.
2, but
That's,
if we go 3 deep, and then you're the one that knows what your ranking is in your head, but if somebody else steals your pick, then go your next pick.
Okay, got it.
I mean, we could do this like in grade school to pick teams for
Oh, yeah.
volleyball. That's probably where I learned to do it, on the playground. That'd be all right with you, Cheyenne?
That's great.
Just as a way to be efficient and respectful of people.
Okay, so take a few minutes and do that then.
And we
So-
agreed
so-
we're doing community members for our picks, not school representatives or people, they're not representing the school, but people within the schools. I didn't catch that, Scott.
I thought anybody that had an application, you can pick. It's up to you as a
Okay.
board member.
Okay, that's just clarifying, so.
So just so I can keep track, each person's going to select
Three in their
people,
head.
okay? And then we'll have a total of 15.
Well, no,
No.
no, we'll keep three and then we'll pull the board. And everybody will name one. If
Okay.
their one's already taken, they'll go to their two.
Okay.
They'll go to their three, and they'll
Okay.
have six at the end.
Got it. And
We'll
then,
need about 5 minutes to just welcome.
Dr. Delaney gets,
Dr. Wayne
an at-large.
can consult with his full group and decide what their three are. Or he could not. Because he only heard of 1/3 of the words they said.
So Ron, will I not be sharing this?
No.
Okay. We need this, still.
Eric, this screen just changed.
I stopped sharing the, presentation.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Don't worry.
Now your head is 8 times bigger than it was, Jessica.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'll sit back a little for you, Scott. How's everyone doing on their, I've got 3 named. How about you, Scott?
I have 3.
I have three.
Steve?
I have,
Yep.
Jennifer? Cheyenne? Okay. Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. I will name Stephanie Garber. Scott, let's just, I can see you guys kind of in order, so I can see you and Steve. So Scott, what would be your pick?
I would name Susie Christensen.
How about you, Steve?
Jeff Papke,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Jeff Papke,
Jeff. I don't know who's sitting next to Steve. Jennifer?
Meredith Foley.
Meredith. Okay, and Cheyenne?
Holly Haynes.
And Dr. Yucca? Oh, Dr. Yucca, were you ready? I'm sorry. I forgot you were
Was.
picking. Okay,
Do I have to pick somebody different?
Yeah.
Yes,
so you
So
would
you
need,
want-
yeah,
From anyone picked so far?
yes.
Yeah. Then I'll pick Jenny Brooks.
So Madam Chairman, I nominate Stephanie Garber, Susie Christensen, Jeff Papke, Meredith Foley, Holly Haynes, and Jenny Brooks to be the 6 members of the select committee.
I
Subject-
second.
okay. So all those in favor of Jennifer, or sorry, Jennifer, I'm looking at Jennifer, sorry. Stephanie Garber, Susie Christensen, Jeff Papke, Meredith, I didn't write her last name clearly,
Foley.
Foley, Holly Haynes and Jenny Brooks, say aye.
I,
Aye. And any opposed? Okay, Tammy, please note our decision was 5-0 for those 6 candidates.
Got
All
it.
right, very fast, Scott, thank you.
Very
That's
good.
awesome.
Very well balanced committee.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, do we need to appoint the administrators and,
The 9?
yeah,
No, the 9,
We already did that.
we talked to the attorney at the ESD. And what she had said is the board had already delegated that authority. So, came through Jay and those people are already, good to go. So.
Put it on board. Perfect.
Yep, so now there's 15 people that are officially on the screening group, okay? And I send each one, and I started, because we knew who the 9 were. We started last week because I knew this would take a while to kind of get everything going, and we wanna be marching forward with our process. So each person gets a confidentiality agreement. And once they sign that, there are some 3 different options for them to attend a virtual session to be trained on the screening process and to get the materials digitally. So we did meet
Yes.
last Thursday
Yes.
night, and Jennifer attended. And so that was, I think we had 8 or 9 that were there from that first group. And so there's 2 more dates, but I'm gonna add a 3rd just because we have these 6 new people. And board members, it's good for you to attend one of these, just so you can see, be a part of the conversation and have the information that the screening committee is getting as well as yourself. And so I believe the next one was Wednesday, the 24th.
Mhm.
These are at 7 PM.
Are they here?
No, it's virtual.
Oh, they're virtual.
It's virtual. And then there was also one scheduled for the 29th.
that's the night of the listening session, right?
Yes.
So maybe
Yes.
that's, okay. So, I'd like to get your feedback on another time to pick. So if we could do, if people are, preferably, I don't know if a Saturday is bad for people. I know that's better for some people. It's horrible for others, but that's why I like to get choices, so. I know evenings are bad for folks too, so if there's a time that,
Calendar.
Maybe you should just do it Saturday, the 27th, and for people that need a Saturday.
yeah, that's kind of what I was leaning toward. Okay, now, if there's a board member that none of those things work for you, I can meet with you individually on Zoom. It won't take long to kind of give you the information, okay? Because,
And where do you get the link, Rob, for the virtual meeting?
I
Where would the
will,
community members and so
yeah, I'm
forth?
gonna email it to them. I'll reach out to
Okay.
each person individually.
Okay,
Yeah. So in addition, Jay will have the hard copies of all the files. So, and because some people are like, they prefer being able to come down and look at things, hard copy. And so he'll have access to those. So if someone wants to come down and arrange with Jay, they can do that to screen those in that way if they prefer. Okay,
But they'll also be electronically available?
yes, electronically available via the meeting, the Zoom meeting, the training, you'll have access immediately electronically. And they'll also be available hard copy through HR and Jay. Okay. So. And then the other thing that came up, Jennifer, do you want to share kind of some of the feedback we got from the group?
I can. When we were doing the training with Rob, Thursday night, we had great feedback from those that, were able to attend. And there was a couple of things that had come up. They wanted to make sure that, they really felt like it was a hard stop, like, okay, I'm on the screening committee, I'm gonna give you my feedback, and then that's it, that's our part of it. And some of them thought maybe they would be able to go a little bit further with the screening part of it, with the interviewing process, and so they asked that if that is the case, please make it abundantly clear that their job is the screening committee. You're to go through, you're to give us who you think would make it through on the interviews, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. And then that's the end of our position. There were quite a handful of them that said, hey, is there any way that we could sit in and listen on the interviews and maybe be a part of it, not asking questions, but being able to listen in and then maybe give feedback later on to the board of what that would look like. One of my thoughts was if this was a discussion, is maybe a person from each group, the classified, the certified, the administration, and then also, out of the community members that were selected tonight, that they would be able to sit in on maybe that first round of interviews and listen in, and then be able to provide feedback to the board. And I told them I would definitely bring it tonight, as a discussion for it.
Yeah, and just in addition to that, some of the comments were, they're used to screening committees that screen out people, so that the next level doesn't, they don't see all of them, they see just the ones that made it through screening. Whereas when we discussed this earlier with the board was like, we want the input and feedback from the screening committee, but the board is reserving the right to select for interviews who they want from the whole list. So the thought was, there'll be a meeting, and we've got it scheduled for February 12th, executive session, when this board is going to determine who is going to be invited for the interviews based on all the screening data. So some of the people on the call were advocating that either they could be involved in that discussion, or is it just information that they provide that the board is looking at? And there is a rubric that's been designed. And so it won't just be, here's my thoughts and feelings. People will be able to score and rank the candidates in 5 different areas. So,
And that's in those files.
yeah, and that's all gonna be in the files when you have that. So hopefully Jennifer and I represented their thoughts
Mhm.
to that, and we said we'd bring it up to the group.
I don't think it's feasible to expand that group. I mean, you could, but it'll limit the amount of honesty you get from the candidate, and it
Yep.
will make it much more difficult to maintain confidentiality.
Yep.
So I would think of just logistically, that is a bad idea.
I agree with Scott.
Didn't we move the February 12th executive session to into March?
We did.
No, well, I wasn't aware of that.
I don't
That
have
was
time
for
on it for
teacher
me.
review.
I was gonna
Well-
say, the one that got moved was contract reviews, which was pushed out a month or whatever that is.
But if we move it to March,
If we move it to March, we're gonna lose all of.
Oh, yeah, no,
We
we
can't-
Yeah.
have to meet to discuss who's gonna get invited, and February 12th, I saw it on the calendar, and I just assumed that if there's a meeting on the 12th, that we could do it on that day, because that will give us, from now till then, will be enough time to screen. You do have, 17 applicants, and
You
so
have
that's
17
17 applicants that
Wow.
met
So,
qualifications, so.
Rob, we're gonna need to talk about the timeline because Scott has some scheduling conflicts. And so we'd like to try to have Scott involved in all
I could-
aspects as much as possible, but
Yeah, we can,
I don't know about dates for Scott. Let's try to work around those as opposed to what's currently already on there. Because I think we're gonna need to adjust some things, which I thought you were covering tonight, so we would have gotten to that.
yeah,
So,
that's our next topic.
I can do the 12th, that's fine. I will just have to Zoom. You'll have to set me up virtually.
Okay.
I'll do it
Okay.
virtually.
so let's, okay, so we're gonna put the February 12th back on. And maybe we could just have this be the only topic, Scott, as opposed to adding on more board agenda items, just to keep our superintendent process flowing.
Sure.
Since that was gonna be an executive session as well, and then we could follow up with everything else that was moved to March, if that works for your schedule.
So are you looking at doing that at 6:30?
You guys can pick the time, so it's.
But point in the middle of the night, I Belgium.
What's the time difference where you're at gonna be, Scott?
9 hours or 8 hours, depends on, but we're in daylight savings still, so.
Yeah.
4:30.
CB.
Yeah, 4:30 AM, that should be.
Get up.
So if you did it maybe a lunchtime thing here,
Hmm?
if they did a lunchtime thing here, then it would be 9-ish.
It's all right, it'll work. Maybe regular 6:30, it'll work.
My calendar says 5:30.
5:30, whatever time it is.
I had 5:30 to 6.
8 or 9.
Put it on there.
Yeah, that's.
Well, Probably,
Wait,
what's
No, that's good, that works.
5:30 or 6:30, Scott?
Had it on at 5:30.
5:30 is
Yeah.
fine.
5:30 will work, okay. Just
Mm.
trying to.
Yeah.
So we can leave the executive meeting we had on the 12th at 5:30. So if we could, we could put that back on for the purpose of this, Tammy, that would be great.
You will? Oh, good, because I don't have a 5:30 timeframe somehow.
That's weird, 'cause I've got it
But
on
you
my
see
phone.
it.
I have
Yeah.
5:30.
Yeah.
That works
So
great.
good. I'll think they're for sure.
And that meeting is to just determine who gets an interview.
Round one interview, yes.
So Rob,
How many?
do we need to have our screening done by the 12th? Is that our next hard deadline?
Yep, that would be the work. From now, that's what, is that 3 weeks from now?
Pretty close to.
What's,
And Rob, you'll get us
today's the
some of those
22nd, right? That's,
applications.
Yes.
Oh, no, that's three
that's
weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
3
it's
weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and what I'll do is I'll send out to the people, I'm tracking everyone that I've met with and I'll do individual meeting if you can't make any of those screening time. So you'll all have all the data. In addition, Jay will have the data. Okay. So, question? All right.
I
Well,
don't,
let's-
do we, sorry, I do have a question. Are we staying with the same, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Are we staying with the same outline process we had already agreed upon?
Let's look at the timeline. I brought that up because we have to make a few, just so, as you know, nothing goes as planned, but you always have a plan. So, we're gonna have to make a couple of adjustments. Oh.
See?
Perfect. Good time.
Improvement though, from last.
Oh.
All right, so go ahead and just scroll down there on the screen, and so 1.6, we did our public session on the community report. This candidate screening is going on now. And the other one I'd like that we just decided was 2.3, having,
Mom?
yep,
That's for long. That was just bleeding through from somebody's body.
oh, okay.
I
So,
can't hear Rob, so I'm trying to test if it's my speakers. He just went dead.
Okay,
We hear you.
we can hear you. Can you hear none of us?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing really quick. Jessica, can you hear us?
Well, now she's off, huh?
Her headphones off. I'll reshare the screen.
Here she is.
Like she's trying to.
Can you hear us, Jessica?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Great. So we also just made a decision on the 2.3. We're gonna be selecting the candidates for round 1 interviews. And then what I would recommend is, well, that should actually be 2.4, but the round 1 interviews, I would recommend that we do those via Zoom as well, simply because based on, we've got a wide range of candidates from outside this, we've got only, I think, 6 or 7 from Oregon, so there's a lot. And so that, doing that first round via Zoom would be a good way to kind of get that first initial field down to another field. So if we could we haven't picked a date yet for that first round of interviews, but we should.
Okay.
So if doing a Zoom sometime within that time frame would work for everyone in the group, then we should make that call.
Let's start with Scott's. Can you hear me?
Yeah. we can
Okay,
hear
let's
you.
start with Scott's timeline, because I think he's still gone most of the rest of the month, so.
And although if we're doing Zoom, I can
Right.
push it, into wherever.
Okay.
So, what dates are those? Right now, you've got it on the 20th?
Well, it just
I'll
says
think
that
close.
round 1 there, at 2:15 to 2:23, it could be pushed out to 2:30. We have the visitation.
2:30?
Two twenty-nine, 2:29.
That would be great. I'm back the 28th, so if we could push it to the 29th, that was sort of the first. But if we are going before then, that's fine.
It might be a little bit risky as there's so many openings. And if we select the candidates on the 12th and they're waiting 2 weeks, it's possible to lose some candidates. So if we could do it that week of, in that timeframe, that'd be great, but if not.
That third week of February.
Or the end of this, or I just put on there, well, 15th to the 23rd.
In that case, the 20th probably works best for me.
If we could do the 20th or 21st, I'm pretty open those days. I don't know if that's too late.
No, that's doable.
How about any of those dates?
Stick with the 20th.
What time? I've got another meeting, I was already meeting on the 20th.
Or we move it to
What
21st.
time's your meeting? We can move it up.
6.
We do it at 4? Or Scott, are you still gonna be in Europe? Yeah.
Yeah,
Why don't you set the time?
We can do it earlier in the
the
day,
21st is fine.
or the 21st. 21st is fine with me, but
I'm good either day.
I'm good either day.
I can do the 20th during the day, the 21st anytime.
Fine with me, that's gonna be the middle of the night. no matter where you
So
set it, so-
Rob, which day do you have the meeting at 6 on?
That was the,
What was that?
which day? do you have
Which
the
day
meeting
is
set?
your meeting at 6 on? The
20th.
20th or the 21st?
20th.
The 20th, so what about if we did the 21st, Scott, at that 5:36 range again?
That's fine.
So
Around how long?
this will be an interview, right? So this may take
Several hours, right?
3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
Do we wanna set it like 4 o'clock?
So
Rob,
a 4 to 8, a 4 to 8.
On the 21st?
I can do that.
All right, 21st, 4 to 8. Perfect.
Sure.
And how many interviews would we be doing?
You're gonna make that decision on the 12th.
I think we.
But I mean, are we trying to squeeze them all into this block on the 21st?
No, not all 17.
No, the screening, we'll get, on the 12th, you're gonna decide. You had originally talked about trying to select the top 5. Depending on the candidate pool, you may,
You might have 6.
you might have more, or, you know.
Right, so I'm
Yes.
asking on the 21st, are we trying to interview everyone we selected on the 12th on the 21st? Or are we just doing 1, 2?
Yeah, I would recommend you do it in a set all at the same time, just because it's so hard to get people together.
Okay. Be a long morning for you, Scott.
All right.
Tammy, are you gonna send out an invite on that? Okay.
Okay, Jessica, those were the topics.
Okay. So do we need to, did we get the clarification on the committee is just screening? Are we sticking with our original? We had decided the 15 was gonna be a panel that screened, gave us the results, and that was the end of what they were doing. Or are we needing to have more of a discussion on what Jennifer brought up?
Is the executive session the problem? Other people in the executive session?
No, it's people keeping their mouths shut, that's a problem.
Yes,
Well, that's confidentiality.
Yeah,
If you want
people,
something known, stamp at executive session.
I agree with Scott and Jessica on this one, just to keep it more seamless.
Everybody has an opportunity to meet the finalists at the community meet and greet and provide their input. So, but that's the appropriate time for more feedback.
they'll be, the screeners have access to all the files and can provide as, as much detailed feedback as they put into process. So they'll have all that.
okay, so could we leave that or make that clear, Rob, that we're gonna stick with our original decision? That
Yeah, I
that
can-
role will just be the screening,
Yeah, I can communicate that to the 15.
okay?
Plus the community meet and greet.
I mean, it's important to note that at this stage, the candidates may or may not have informed their boards and communities that they're considering leaving. This may come as a total shock that some are gonna be very obvious. I'm looking around, I'm done. But others, we have to protect them
Right.
because, or, the worst thing that can happen is somebody loses their job because they came and talked to us,
Right. No, I understand.
And then we don't pick them.
right? And I've seen that happen
Yep.
before.
Okay. Okay,
All right.
so Rob, just to clarify on the 21st, will we have time to consider who we are wanting to be finalists? Or do we have a different time frame for that? Or do we have to make that decision that night?
Like the next couple
Because then
days
you've got to
after-
get the next round of interviews going. I see on
Well,
2.4, it's announced finalists. We didn't cover that.
Can I suggest there, Jessica, based on my own experience with this, that you leave that decision open?
Okay,
Usually, it's pretty obvious at the end of a process that you have somebody you want to talk to further, or a
Right.
couple somebody. But if you need the time, you can always reserve
Yeah.
the time and say, we want to take a couple days to think about this, can we get back together? It'll just depend, but I'll give you 99% chance you'll know at the end of the interviews.
Yeah, our
Okay.
goal would be to decide that day, but we won't rush it. If we need
okay,
more
that's what
time.
I just didn't know if I needed to know right then and there, so.
You'll
Okay.
definitely know who you don't want to interview.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for Rob? Okay, well, thanks for trekking out, Rob, and being there in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a fun drive.
Well, Rob, I just want to say too, sorry about the disaster at the last meeting with the
Oh.
technology. And sorry, thank you for making the drive over. Really appreciate that.
No, it's
That
always better to
Made
be
it
able
much
to
better.
interact.
But sorry
like
about that
this.
earlier one. I
No,
understand.
it all worked out for the best. We were able to give people more time to respond and all of that, so.
Yes, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So we're gonna take a 5-minute break again. Eric may not need that long, but that just gives us the right amount of time, but he's gotta get set up to move forward with Joel, so stand up, stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, but,
I stand in for it. Stand up.
So you still good?
Yeah. That's fine. How's it supposed to be? Yeah.
And, he has a hard time.
No.
Okay, are we ready to get started?
All right, Jessica, can you hear us now?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Awesome.
Okay, are you ready to take over, Joel? You got about 50 minutes.
I,
And I'd
I'm
like
ready.
to not rush topics, so if we need to move, some of your bullet points to,
Yeah,
OSBA said, to a different work session or something like that, I don't want to push anything, but staying in
for
a
sure.
frame would be great, so.
So I promised Chair Brumble that I would stay within our timeframe, so I think the best way to accomplish that.
Can I say welcome back?
I was jumping right into it. Board, it's great to see you. It's great to be back. So good to see everyone. It's been great to kind of catch up to speed real quick in the last six work days. But no, it's great to be back. Excited to jump right back into work. And Dr. Yeka's been awesome, and just the team. I just love this team. So it's good to be back here and working with you all.
Welcome back.
So awesome, thank you. So let me jump into this. The thought is, what I'll do is I'll kind of go through the overview, and then that'll leave a lot of time at the end for board discussion. I didn't coordinate with Janet or Rob at all, but they both touched on strategic plan. And you might have been asking yourselves, like, what is our strategic plan? And I think we're at such a perfect time, kind of like you were speaking about earlier. Let's go from being reactive and dealing with the issue of the day, where if we've got a clear plan in place, then it not only shows, hey, we are sticking our flag in the ground and saying this is the mission direction of the district. It also helps us say, hey, here's what we're not focused on. And it really narrows our scope so that we can accomplish something as a board and as a district and as staff. So I'm excited to jump into this work. I also was excited because I'm starting off with a timeline, and I was nervous that when Janet was putting her circles up, I was like, oh man, I hope my circles match hers. So, and they do. So how this all starts, if you remember back in July, typically we get together as a board, we have a work session, and we say, what are our priorities? What is our vision? What's our focus areas? What do we want the school district to work on this year as a board? And you hear that from your constituents. You've all listened to people through a variety of ways. So we start with that typically in July. From there, the district staff creates just a draft plan. This is the plan in front of you where we try to take all those different items and put them in a tangible plan that then we can execute. So we're right here where we've created this plan for your review, your discussion, your refinements. And a point I really want to emphasize is this is collaborative. This is your insight. This is your goals. This isn't Joel's plan. This isn't Dr. Yeka's plan. This is us working together to get the district on a mission and in a direction. So what we'll do, we'll go through, we'll review and refine this tonight. At the next board meeting, we'll vote to kind of formalize, because we'll make, some revisions tonight, change a few things. Next, we'll bring it to the board in February for a formal adoption through a vote. From there, Dr. Yek and I go to work. We're looking at each of these goals. We're working with staff. We're working with facilities, budget, everything to implement this plan. One thing that Janet really focused on, that's a huge point in all of this, is we will give quarterly updates. So typically after each trimester, I throw a bunch of charts and graphs in front of you, and like Janet said, a huge responsibility of the board is monitoring progress. And how do you know how kids are progressing in math? How do you know how we're doing in reading, or, how's our budget? So reporting these things quarterly, some things are monthly like budget, but that will help you guys as board members fulfill your role in monitoring how the progress of the school district's going. So we do quarterly updates on this. Then we'll go to, we usually do some sort of end of year review in the summertime, usually in a work session of some sort. And then from there, we say, hey, we accomplished this goal, this goal, this goal. So we can move those aside heading into next year. Hey, let's keep this one on. We didn't quite make the progress. So it's just this cycle of improvement and creating a mission for the school district. Any questions on timeline or anything like that?
Joel, I had one question. Shannon McCaw kind of hit on it when she was talking about math scores, and do we have a plan to effectively communicate with our community and parents? Like, well, the state of Oregon said that 20% is passing if you make this test. Because Shannon was talking about how we want to focus on kids actually being able to, do the math, do it properly, and it's probably not going to reflect in the testing. Do we have a way to communicate that effectively with parents? Like, it's gonna look like your kids are failing at the state level, or, because I pulled data, I'm kind of rambling, I guess. I pulled data, like from 2009 for literacy, and then
OSAS, SVAC.
and I was looking and like, we got 78% pass, the passing rate was like 20%.
The test changed.
And so I just want to make sure that, like, moving forward with, that we have some sort of plan that is, like, tailored to Kirk County.
Totally.
And so, I don't know how we do that, but because parents can say, oh, well, they bombed the state test, but they're actually passing. I think Shannon was trying to hit on that, but maybe I'm not.
Yeah, so that's one thing we've looked in the past where, our circle of control versus what we can't control. We can't control what the ODE puts out. But what we've done is we've created a number of internal tests, because we said the state changes what they do, seems like every 6 months, and we're not quite sure what it's all about. So how can we internally know that our students are progressing? So we put a number of measures in place. For example, for math, K-5, we benchmark kids in the fall, winter, and spring to see where they're at using something called Imagine Math. So as part of the board goals, we report on that. At the middle school level, we adopted something called Imagine Learning, iReady. So that's another assessment that we have internally, 6-8. For English language arts, K-5, we use an assessment called DIBELS. We do that fall, winter, spring, and we report to the board generally on how many kids are proficient there. And then finally, 6-8 for English language arts, we also have adopted that iReady. So that iReady is new. We used to use a test just created by teachers, but we wanted something that had a little more national comparison to see how our kids were doing stacked up against different states. So we've adopted that iReady. So that'll be new this year that we haven't used in the past. At the high school level, traditionally we've looked at just, hey, if you passed 4 years of English, we assume that you're proficient in reading and writing. But we actually had a conversation, I met with the high school team today, of what internal assessments can we put in place? Because we know a ton of juniors are opting out of the OSAS test. So how can we guarantee to our families that we are graduating kids with reading, writing, and math skills? So those internal assessments are part of this and something that we report out on.
Perfect.
That makes sense.
So talk about ASVAB.
So we talked about, so we're looking at 3 different assessment options at the high school level, because like I said, junior year students are all opting out of the OSAS. There's not a lot of value for the student or the family. So in talking with Jake and Bree at the high school actually today, There's the ASVAB, which a test that I believe was created by in the Eisenhower era, that looks at different subjects, and it's not tied to the state. It's something that has a long trajectory. So we're looking at that. There's also a assessment put out by ACT called WorkKeys, that also assesses those. So we're gonna look at all these different assessments. Doesn't look like some of these WorkKeys. But we're wanting to figure out what's the best internal assessment so that we can guarantee to our communities that, that students are graduating proficient. So.
Yeah, I think
ASVAB.
ASVAB is, it's hilarious we're discussing this, because we had this. It was the 80s when we had it. But, you know, it works very well. It's the test of military readiness. We used to do it for sophomores did it. And then they found out, you know, whether they were on track or not. And we had a really good uniform guidance to compare against the state testing. And I think that's kind of what we need now after what we heard last month.
Bring back ASVAB.
Well, just in addition, you
Right,
have
yes.
for all students, so we can say, you know, whatever the state is doing now, this is a consistent measure that doesn't change all the time.
So let me do this. Let me jump into the 3 goals, and then from there we can go into the specifics of what that would look like. Jennifer or Jessica, sorry.
I think too, emphasizing what is proficiency, like. I think what Cheyenne, and I'm not trying to speak for her, but what she's emphasizing is that the community knows that we're not looking. When we give you the proficiency rate, we're using, like Scott said, this test that's used whatever nationwide or around the world, and it readily has changed or hasn't changed, whatever, you know, has not changed often, I guess you could say. It doesn't change every 6 months yearly. So we're utilizing this in Crook County as opposed to the test that the state keeps changing every 6 months. I think that is the part we're missing with the community, is them understanding, and us too. I mean, me too. What are we proficient in? The state testing? Because those standards are so low. Let's raise the bar, you know, and an overall test, like Scott said, the one he's like, we use this in the 80s. Okay, well, it's still around, you know, let's utilize it again. Or it's just getting that out to the community as well.
So let's do this. So yeah, and that's why I think we're looking at those sort of assessments to say, what's something outside of the state of Oregon that we can use, that our community understands, gets, that we can point to say our students are at this level. Let's jump real quick into goal 1. So this is goal 1. This is what we want, all academic excellence and support for all students. So that would be kind of our main goal that we're looking for, one of the 3. The objectives related to that under the core academics. So we want all students proficient in reading, writing, and math. We want to complete a successful math science curriculum adoption. We're going to improve students' math, reading, and writing. We have to have solid curriculum. So we need to get as much public involved in looking at this stuff, giving feedback to staff so that we make the right decision. And then finally, another thing that the board talked about in July is increasing the number of instructional assistants providing academic support. So that's something we can measure. Hey, here's where we're at before the board started. Here's where we're at now. So we report on those quarterly. And then there's the second category in this that's about enhancing academics, where we talked a lot about our performing arts program and music. So that would be a focus area that we would target for improvement. Implementing a high quality AP program and increasing the number of students passing those exams. That committee's already running with Jake and Bree. So we give quarterly updates on that. Providing a robust CTE program and making sure students are graduating job ready with industry certifications. That's another thing we report on. Hey, here's how many kids are in CTE classes. And then finally, this is one of the things that, man, I think we do such an awesome job at our high school, but we can't take our focus off this, because we have to have more and more students and more parents knowing about all the dual credit opportunities that are available. Because there's not a parent that I don't talk to that says, man, my kid graduated the high school with 64 college credits and it saved us $25,000. So that's something that I think we got to keep our eye on that ball, so that all students have those opportunities and know about them.
One thing I jotted down that Jessica, I know, and Cheyenne hit on, to be able to provide consistent curriculum and support throughout all schools. Is that something that fits what is that the place for it?
provide consistent curriculum and support throughout all schools. And I heard Jessica say something like
Yeah,
that.
it goes to the music, it goes to the reading, it goes to making sure that everything's consistent throughout.
That there's no gaps or holes.
Yeah,
It depends on, again, it doesn't depend on what school you go to.
Correct.
Do you want input on these as we go along?
we can, we
I
can
just wrote it down because we talked about it a little bit, and I
I
wanted to
like
make sure I
that.
got it out.
Jessica's.
Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
So again, this is something I'm learning, but I learned that, this school gets these resources because there is title school. This school doesn't get this resource because we'd have to allocate that differently, or, this school gets it because they're a title school and this school doesn't, what have you. So I would rather see things like Steve's saying across the board. I don't know how that entails with different schools, but instead of looking at it's a title school, they get this, could we make a baseline that all the schools should have X, Y, and Z? And then, yeah, obviously those title schools that are categorized that way for a reason have those extra resources, but I think we're missing some of the entry level stuff at our non-title schools. And I think that goes with the jumping that no matter which school you attend, it should kind of be across the board. And I don't know if we hit that because we have the differences in their titlings.
Yeah, we can definitely, I think, start that process of kind of like what you were talking about earlier of let's do an assessment of where we're at as a school district and find our gaps and then come up with a plan to fill those.
Is that what we would call horizontal alignment? Could we
Yeah.
just do a goal of assess horizontal alignment
Yeah.
across schools in the district? Which would mean everybody gets the same thing no matter where they're at, roughly.
It should be the way a school should operate. I would think.
Yeah. So yeah, we can put it, I think it fits well under that goal area. And that way we're reporting to the board our progress on that regularly and we can highlight those areas and seek to remedy them if we're finding gaps.
I wanted to suggest a couple others in that area where we might make some improvements. In the first one, the core academics, all students proficient in reading, writing, and math. Could we add science and social studies? Those being the other two major ones that we should not be ignoring. Because we want
Yeah.
proficiency in all 5 areas. And then the second one around curriculum, do we not still have a health curriculum pending?
It's science.
I know
But we've
science-
had health, we put it off because we were gonna send it off to be developed, remember
I
that?
thought we still had 3 going, Scott, as well.
What I'll do, I'll connect with Carrie and figure out the status of that and see where we're
I
at.
think health needs to be added back in.
So your suggestion is add science, social studies,
Science and
and
social studies
and then add
one,
health to
and
the
add
adoption.
Health in 2.
Because we're gonna get backlogged when we have.
Yep.
Social studies coming up in 25.
And I think we better spend some time understanding the social studies curriculum, the current one and the new one, before we get to the actual adoption point, because I have a feeling that's gonna be pretty contentious.
Did you say it was 2025?
I believe so. It's
Yeah,
2025.
Yeah, social studies is 2025.
Will occur right after I leave the board.
You can come back as a community member, Scott.
Anything to do with that books. It's a foreign curriculum.
So just to go through what I have, I've got add science and social studies to number 1. I've got add the health to curriculum adoption number 2. I've got assess horizontal alignment, provide consistent support in curriculum. We'll kind of wordsmith that. Anything else on goal 1 that you guys would like to see?
In just the core part or in the enhancing part as well, Joel?
Any,
Put it where it belongs.
any other part, Jessica, do you have other feedback for the enhancing piece?
Yes and no. I didn't attend the AP meeting because I didn't hear back from Melinda on our meeting laws, so this may have been covered. But I think it's also important to relay to our high school students. We have so many options, which I think is great. Options are good, but we have regular core classes, we have honor core classes, we have AP classes, we have dual college credits. I just don't know if there's maybe a way to combine some of those, or, is a teacher really needing to teach all 3 of those? I know there's some teachers that teach a regular core class, they teach an honors class, and then we have something that stems to either a dual college credit or an AP program. So I just wonder if there's a way to, if we want to gear towards AP and dual credits, you know, do you need the honors? You know what I mean? Is there a way to look at those where we might free up some of the teachers' time to maybe pour into some of these programs we want to look at building? I think some of our teachers might be overloaded with the different classes they're being asked to teach. I don't know.
Yeah, that one is tricky because sometimes a teacher could be teaching the same class, and that's counts for dual credit for a particular university, counts as an AP course for other universities, then you gotta take the test. So I think we provided a report on this, and I believe it might be time to provide an updated report to the board. We can look to add that to one of the agendas, because it does get pretty wonky and pretty confusing, and we definitely don't want to be overloading, creating any inefficiencies for teachers that we don't have to be. So maybe we'll put that down to provide a report, and we can kind of embed it in some of this work.
Okay.
Anything else on goal 1? Let's jump over. So the goal 2 is all about community. That was one of, as the board came on, that was one of the big pushes. So goal 2, we just worded as enhance school, family, and community collaboration. Our main objectives here are, first of all, around community involvement. And some of these might have changed since July. So again, this is a very fluid document. So one of the things we did, the board put in quarterly board superintendent community listening sessions. The board also increased board meeting public comment time and access to video recordings. And then I'm not sure how much progress we got on this. We talked about increasing the number of volunteers or volunteer opportunities in school. There was discussion around getting more people involved in the schools.
The reading
kids
thing.
I know we've got a smart reader program, but that we don't have that at all the schools. So can we get volunteers to do that? So really getting people back involved. Anything around community involvement?
Do you strike 1 and 2 because they're done?
It's good to have a big green check. Yeah, so
Yeah, I would expect number 2. I agree with.
so get rid of number 2.
I mean, you're already doing your quarterly listening, you're
Yeah.
doing both of them.
I mean, quarterly, that's an ongoing.
That is an ongoing,
We
that's
got
true.
2, where,
Okay.
I don't know what else we would do.
I'll strike number 2.
So Joel, I think on 3, we may need to look at figuring out what we do to let people know there are volunteer positions. You know, with getting the smart reading program going, what do we need? Do we need somebody to lead that? Is that why it's not going at, you know, this school and it's going at that one? What do we need from the community? Somehow we need to convey that, and say, we want to add this smart program to this school and here's what we need. I think that would be more beneficial than just saying increase the number.
Increase the opportunities in communication of the opportunities.
That would be increase the number of volunteers and in number and awareness of volunteer opportunities in school.
Awesome.
I think with the smart reader program, Carrie reported back that it's really hard. They're having a shortage on their end. So then I think the thought, to maybe each school, so that they're each provided the same opportunity, has that parent volunteer. So each school has the same thing, especially like K-3.
Yeah.
And so, you
It
know.
kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier about creating a horizontal alignment across
So
our
that each
schools.
school has a reading
Yeah.
program going with community
Yeah.
volunteers or parent volunteers. And I'd assume just like, when you come in at the beginning of the year, the teachers send out emails like, we need
Yeah.
time for reading groups. You know,
So-
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, can parents sign up? And then we reach out to the community or send it out in our communication. So each school has equal. And
Yeah,
I think that Sting's pillar is partnering, has some partnership with the library coming in and bringing some books. So maybe if we could do programs,
yeah.
the library could then bring in some different reading materials and.
I'll put a note that when we talk about this one, an update, we want specific updates around the reading program, because it sounds like that's, kind of a hot topic right now of, can we create a local volunteer army of the public that will help, get our students on track for reading? So I'll put that down that we'll touch on that specifically. Moving on, the next portion of this goal, the objectives were around access and communication. That was a big piece, with the board coming in. Improve family and community access to school curriculum and library resources. We did some work around, enhancing our back to school nights. We did some work around making sure our library databases were clean, clear, and user-friendly on the websites. And then I know, Carrie Lombach's also done a lot of work of creating a, curriculum library that folks can come check out. We've also provided weekly school and district communication to CCSD families and community. This was a big piece that I remember I've seen now a community member can sign up to get our weekly communications or whatever communications, so that way they have access and aren't left out of the loop. And then this is one, increased family participation at conferences. That was something we kind of started that we didn't do anything different this fall, but I know the high school was working on a different thing called Conference Plus, where they would try to get, the biggest thing is getting more families involved in their students' education. So that's a good vehicle to do that. Any questions on goal number 2?
Joel, did we look at changing the back to school nights when teachers were actually in buildings where parents could actually talk with them and it, if I remember right, it was rushed, or the teachers were like either not there or just getting back like day one. So I mean, they were just like totally blindsided, not having time to be ready for the school year. So I don't know if you looked at that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we want to carry this into next year, because I think it was very rushed of like, we need to enhance our back to school night. So yeah, I believe keeping that kind of idea going, so that way we're way more prepared this upcoming fall to have those a little more coordinated.
And not all on the same night.
Not all on the same. Yeah.
That was hard with families with kids in multiple schools.
All right, so as we jump into our last goal, facility safety and operations. So the goal here is we want safe, stable, and effective school operations. So when we think about facilities and operations, our biggest issue around operations is we need to complete a successful superintendent search and hiring process. So that's goal 1. The board has talked, we need to do an assessment of our district facilities through long-range planning, and then explore potential bond options and timelines. Leland, if I can get done at 5:45, which I think I'm going to. Leland and Anna have some time, some information to share here in a little bit. We always need to be maintaining a strong and stable financial positions. We do have the best CFO in the state, Anna Logan. And she gives monthly financial reports as part of your normal board packet. We've got budget committee coming up, so we always generally keep that as a goal. And then finally, one of the main priorities of the board is establishing and maintaining effective and clear policies to help us guide the administration of the district. So that would be one that we want to stay in there as operations. Shifting over to school safety, that was another big priority of the board. We want to enhance safety and security measures in all school buildings. Leland will tell me that we do not share a lot of that information publicly for obvious reasons, but we've done a lot of safety and security measures already this school year. We want to ensure this is something for the board, ensure all students have an access to a school counselor. That's one of our biggest safety measures, is that mental health piece, that students are getting help when they need it. And then finally, Scott always reminds us that connecting all students to at least one extracurricular activity is one of the biggest safety measures we can have. Every student having a niche, having some friends at school or something they're interested in, that is huge on our school safety. And
They belong.
Yeah, so that's something I think it's really important that we continue to track, report on how many kids are engaged in at least one activity. So anything around goal 3 that you want added or refined?
I have a proposal for the board that we had, and I don't know if it goes in 2 or 3, doesn't really matter, but I think it's time for us as a district to tackle the issue of support for our coaches. We have inconsistency across our sports teams as far as knowledge about things like safety or how to communicate with parents better, or just the fundamental changing duties and rights, like, you know, Title IX, how do you do Title IX, that sort of stuff. what's happening with the league. It would be really useful. I've talked to Rob about this before. I've talked to Dwayne about this. If we had a once or twice a year coaches academy that we required our coaches to attend, where we could go over a basic curriculum for how to do this stuff and try and bring the level of knowledge and skills of our coaches, especially the new ones, up to the same level. Depending on which program you're in, you're going to get a different coaching experience right now, based on their experience.
Yeah.
And it would be something we ought to do anyway. We've required teachers to go through in-services. Why don't we require coaches to go through in-services?
Are you
Yeah,
talking about us making something, Scott, or, cause they have to be certified?
Rob will entirely be Rob's responsibility. We'll just
I
make
thought
sure.
you were gonna run this.
No.
We'd like to have each one of them to find their own little specific niche thing
Yeah.
that applies to their sport.
I mean, we've all heard enough about a few coaches who, and I'm not naming any names, who found themselves in trouble during the year. And you look at their situations and you think, wow, that could have
Could have
been
been avoided.
I'd like to start being more proactive about avoiding it instead of reacting to it.
I believe we have the full capacity in Mr. Bonner to put something like that together to roll out maybe this spring or get ready to roll out next year. But we gotta start working on it now, so.
Yeah.
I would think it actually would go to number one, because that's a support for.
I was
students.
thinking enhancing academics because we know our extracurriculars really enhance a student's.
I mean, safety is my primary concern. That's
Yeah.
also where you review your concussion protocols and
Yeah.
how to use the trainer and when the release of the student
Yeah.
should happen. Not when the student feels like it, but when the doctor says,
Yeah,
that sort of
Actually, I
thing.
think the coaching staff would appreciate the support.
for
I
sure.
think they would, and that's how I had phrased it was, create a system for uniform support for coaches,
Yeah,
whatever that looks like.
Which is very well support kids.
I think we need something. I don't think we're intervening enough.
okay.
Is that like the gal that Jenna's law with the concussion training
Yeah.
we talked
From the
about?
center.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Center is a
almost
huge
think that would
resource.
fall under 7 or like under school safety,
That's-
like because.
that's where
of the
I'm
We
concussion.
can put that as 8 under school safety.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I think that's probably
Yeah.
to have consistency.
Well, we need a stronger set of coaches that know what their responsibilities, rights, and resources are in these situations they will inevitably face.
And I think Jen went to the presentation, we
I
all got
did.
invited to that.
Yeah, to the Center
Welcome to Center
Foundation.
Foundation.
Yeah, and the Jen, I'm blanking on her name, her mom, she's amazing.
I know,
But
local.
Yes.
she's their local,
Yeah.
but she's
Yes.
wanting to come in and do
Right.
trainings with coaches, and they have taught, they work with the University of Oregon. They have and they're desperate to come in here. This is where their children
yeah,
reside, with her grandchildren. Jenna has children that are here in Crook County, and they were just,
They
they wanna make,
picture block, right?
yes.
yeah.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, I think it'd probably be a good idea too, to reach out. She's
Yeah.
offered several times.
Yes.
That's just part of the.
And this would apply to club sports as well as
Yeah.
the district sponsored sports. in my
Oh,
opinion.
I love it. I think we get the ball rolling on it this year. We have it as a goal and target to either roll out this spring or next fall. But I think Rob could do an awesome job at getting this together and could be something we're proud of.
I think there's also room for mentorship in that, you know, you get a coach like Ernie Brooks, who's been here forever, he's got a few things to tell people who are just starting about how to do this. And maybe he can learn a few things from younger coaches too, because the generations change.
Definitely, I don't think it necessarily matters, maybe you can fit under tenure, any of them,
Mhm.
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
So just next steps, I got the feedback. I will seek to get a final draft to you in your board packet on February, and we always make, a final tweak or two then, but then we vote for it on February to have it be our formal adoption, and then Dr. Yeck and I will go to work and look to implement and get you guys monitoring the progress of how we're doing.
And we're gonna have the lady come back and make sure that.
Hey, Jen could come back and tell us how we're
See,
doing.
look how we just governed and now you're gonna manage.
Just so you know, this only takes about 8 hours of board work, so we hammered it out, in, I think, 35,
That
so.
was amazing. So, and to Janet's point, then this should become our central document for organizing our agendas. How are we doing on these things, which is our regular check-in as a board, learning what we need to learn, digging in where we've got activity and progress, but it takes us out of the react to whatever's in the
Public
atmosphere today and have the board moving forward proactively on delivering this.
And it gives the board,
It's a good organizing principle for us.
so much of it is leadership is not what we say yes to, but what we say no to. And like, no, this is a distraction from our core work.
Absolutely.
So this gives you an anchor of, we can't focus on everything. We're focusing on these things. So we're saying no to some things, which is just as important as what you say yes to. So,
You'll get nothing done otherwise.
This is a very big agenda, maybe on one page, but it's a lot of work.
it is 5:45 and I promised my friend Leland that I'd come and talk about the law.
5:45.
7:45.
It is 7:45.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
That's in your ball, yeah.
He's out in the middle of the ocean, but too bad for you.
All right, so speaking of being reactive. Winter weather always brings on problems. So this last week, or the week before, it all kind of starts to run together. We had quite a few issues occur with roofs. The biggest one of those issues was the middle school, where we had leaks all along the north side of that wing, on the north side. There was some on the opposite side of that hallway as well. And those are all on the metal roof. Now, the biggest leak we had was over, if you go down the gym hall and go out to the east, like you're going out to the mods. Right there by that door, where you go into the small gym, we had a major leak right there. So it was created because the roof's starting to fail up there where the scupper is. And the amount of water that goes onto that flat roof is getting all the water off the big barrel roof that's above the gym. So it's draining on the other roof. And then that roof has to drain that water off. So we found on both sides of that gym, there were issues where those scuppers were starting to leak and the roof starting to fail. It filled, in 4 hours, it filled 2 30-gallon garbage cans over half full, and we weren't catching all the water. I think we pretty much mitigated any of the damage so that there's not gonna be any damage to the gym floor. But I can't stress enough how much we really need to do roofs. We had that one. Crooked River has issues. The flat roof on Crooked River is starting to fail, getting leaks in the middle of it. There's the same thing along the edges where the screwed down metal is starting to leak. We had another roof over at Steen's Pillar. I think that's the only ones we had trouble with, but they're all starting to fail. We did an assessment 5 years ago on all of our roofs and got estimates on that. And when we look at the repairs just for the middle school stuff that happened right now to restore that roof, the costs have increased 60%.
Oh my gosh.
So we're looking at more money than we have to be able to just like restore one. There's no way we can do that with either the maintenance reserve or the general fund. So the best option is a bond. And Anna had a great idea about doing a small bond.
Yeah.
And the thing about doing a small bond is I applied for an awesome grant for the May election. We're guaranteed $6 million as long as we match that if we pass a bond in May. So Anna you have the details. I don't have all the details on the stuff we worked on today.
Yeah, so I basically want to propose to you that we go out for a May bond measure. It's a very short timeline, but we can do it. I've already spoken to several of the people, the vendors that we would need to hire, the bond counsel, the underwriter. So basically what we would do is just go out for a little bit more than $6 million. And the reason for that is if we have to sell it at a discount, we don't know what the bond market will look like, but we want to at least be able to issue $6 million so that we can then get the matching grant of $6 million. To talk about that awesome grant a little bit more, it's basically open for every election cycle. And the way that they decide is based on a ranking of your facilities assessment that we did. We can use that same facilities assessment for a certain amount of time. And we are nearing the end of that. And then it's based on the number of applicants, different school districts that are planning to go out for a bond. Just so happens that the maximum that you can get is 6 million, and we were approved for 6 million for this coming election. So if we go out for a $6 million bond, we can get $12 million. And it will be a very small tax increase. The way we've looked at it, it could be anywhere from 7 cents to 17 cents per thousand. But that's based on, we wouldn't necessarily do a 26-year bond for a $6 million price tag. So we could do a shorter time frame. So we can figure all those details out. I know that we just talked about this at the January school board meeting, and the board said, we're not ready. But I think at that time you were thinking of what we were saying, which was $66 million or $77 million. And so my proposal is that, staff does all the procedural work anyway. We can do all of that. The school board doesn't really need to do anything. You don't need to do any advocacy. If you want to, you can. But basically it would just be, we have at least taken this request for a tax increase to our community, rather than just say, well, we don't know if they'll vote for it, so let's not try. So that's my proposal. What would need to happen is, our very first major deadline with the county is March 1st. So we can do it, I've already checked. But what I would want to have happen is a special board meeting before Scott leaves for Europe. It can be by Zoom, but the reason I want that is because I want to make sure that all 5 board members are able to collectively vote for the bond. Because one of the biggest indicators of whether a bond will pass or not is whether your board is unanimous in support. If the board's not unanimous, it's almost certainly going to fail. So I want to be able to show that the board is in unanimous support of this. So we would schedule a Zoom meeting before February 7th, sometime before February 7th. We would bring a resolution to you, which lays out, how much, and it's all gonna have maximums in there. And then you delegate authorities for signatures and things like that to me and the superintendent. And then we move forward, we can work on the, all of the forms that go to the county and everything. So that's really all that would need to happen.
Sorry, does this have any money allocated to Powell Butte? And then what is our,
Is there a layout?
is there a layout? I mean, I feel like we definitely need to fix our facilities before we pass any fluff and do any fun things, because I know my daughter was at the middle school during all the leaking. It's scary if you don't want to have a child get hurt or something.
That's a fair question, and we did prepare an answer to that, and I just emailed it to you if you don't, mind putting it up on the
Anna,
screen, but
are we gonna get the totals and the breakdowns before you want us to make a decision? Or are you giving it all to us at this special meeting? I would rather like to review it.
sure. It's on its way on the screen right now. That's what I said. I thought it was gonna just pop up right after I said it.
Oh, this is like the breakdown of monies and whatnot?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Eric. I didn't give him any time to prepare this, I'm sorry. Bottom line is, we need $11.5 million in the roofs throughout the district.
And we can get 12 million.
And we can get 12 million. Just with an easy, that doesn't mean we stop there and say, we can't do anything else, because we can do additional small bonds. We can decide how we want to approach additional bonds. We can do a bigger bond at some point. But for right now, I just don't want to lose that $6 million opportunity.
And I believe that Leland mentioned at the January meeting, if we expire the feasibility study or the study you paid for, we have to repay for that.
Yep, in order to
Can
apply
we
for
vote
those.
on it tonight, or is that-
Eric's got a question.
Do we want this shared? Do we want this shared here, or do we want this shared? Not matter. Okay.
Thank you for asking. I think it can be.
Public meeting.
How do you see it? The one's gonna pay for it.
So the main thing is the roofs, between Crooked River, Crooked County Middle School, Steens Pillar, both of the big buildings, plus the Steens Pillar Gym, the Steens Pillar Boiler Room, the maintenance building, which Leland said, do you want me to tell this?
So I can tell it. So the half of the roof on the backside of our maintenance shop, like 2 years ago in a big windstorm, it literally just blew like half of it off. And it just flopped over on itself. Didn't pull the sheeting off, but it pulled everything under that. And we ended up just flopping it back on there and fastening it back down. So it's not in great shape. And it does leak all the time, but it's a shop.
And then Polina. Then another thing that we really need to deal with is adding some security improvements to Crook County High School. And you never really want to say in a public meeting exactly what your weaknesses are for security, so we'll just leave it at that. Same thing for, Steens Pillar, we need some security upgrades and a PA system. And then if we have, I set aside $100,000 for cost of issuance, you have to pay for an underwriter and a bond counsel and a whole bunch of like 6 or 8 things. And then if we have, I put $100,000 in there for just additional security upgrades throughout the district. Again, Leland has in his mind what that needs to be. And then if these estimates are a little high, because sometimes when you go out and bid something, you can either, you can get better deals than what you thought you were gonna get. Then we would do additional heating system improvements to Crooked River, and then additional security upgrades and improvements to the rest of the district.
We do have this letter from Talview.
This is-
Talview
security upgrades
somewhere in there?
Yes.
We have some for them already. We have money allocated for some already.
They just had a roof replaced in the last.
Yes, they are great. Mhm.
Then we had security.
Can I ask one question? I don't know if you really answer it. When we got all the COVID money in the ESSER funds and the roofs were this bad, how come the money was allocated to the HVAC systems instead of the roofs?
It was filtration, air filtration, and, it
And
was
airflow.
the concept of filtering out viruses.
So
Because
that's what the
COVID was
money
stopping.
had to be spent.
It didn't have to be spent, but that was a need that we had, and it was kind of also to address failing boilers.
Well, it was also the extended school year. Those school buildings had gotten so hot in September and May that they were unlivable.
And we
So-
were doing summer school.
We were trying to cool the building space too.
With Steens Pillar, it had absolutely there's no ventilation now, well, now there is. That was some of the improvements they did with that.
Leland, I have a question.
Okay.
When I had met with you originally, just to kind of get an idea of the district in total, I thought there was a lot of cost savings, which I could be wrong, in replacing the HVAC with the middle school if you remove the roofs. So I don't know, would it be more cost effective to put the middle school first in line for the boiler? If there is extra as opposed to Crooked River, is that still not the case, or did I misunderstand you?
Well, so it's complicated. So the middle, ideally, the best way to do the middle school, if you're gonna do the roof and the HVAC, is to tear the roof off. And then you can get into the attic spaces to replace all the piping and the units that have to be changed at the middle school. I don't even know if that's possible in a school year, in a summer. And it would cost, I have no idea what it would cost to replace all 3 of those boilers. Because you have to replace all the coils in every air handler as well as the piping system that's in there. So it would be very, very expensive to start going down that road with just the middle school.
I think at one point we looked at a number that was 4.2 million.
Probably. It would add several million to what we're trying to do.
But
Yeah,
what
so-
would be the savings by removing the roof? Cause is it more expensive to then come back later on and redo the heat after you put a new roof on in the middle school?
It would be more expensive for the work for the contractors would be more expensive because now they're gonna be working in crawl spaces instead of just open air, with a roof off where they could actually just work on the top of it. So if we replace the roof and then we go back and replace the boilers and go with a hot water type system, then all that work's gonna have to be done in the crawl spaces, which is, that's possible to do. It would just be a little bit more
Could we run the
Hard to
bond
do.
for
I was gonna ask.
like 10 or 11 million instead of 6 million and then have enough to do that?
It's up to you. You're starting to get into
Because
That's
it-
up to you guys,
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
I
it's
agree
so
with
much
you, Diane. I
money,
mean, the
but-
difference between 17 cents and 20 cents is not.
It's
gonna
not a
change.
big deal because you don't wanna go back and have to, and then what's the
Well,
price that's
Yeah,
gonna
what you
increase
gotta
for the
get for the basic.
contractors? Like
So-
you said already, 60%.
Could we get the costs, Anna or Leland, for, it sounds like maybe roof and boilers? What would that look like? Could you give us some different options for what? I know this is a crunch time, but it just does, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is in such a short time, but I would,
And adding into that, Jessica, I think it's also worth noting that the cost of this bond is gonna drop like a rock once the Facebook comes back
Right.
on and the data centers start entering. This is a long-term bond, so for a couple of years, it's gonna be high and then it's gonna go wham.
We took that into consideration already
Oh.
and structured so that it would be, more of it would be paid back once the.
So if we did that, 17 cents sounds really.
Well, that was a shorter payback period.
What's the dollar value for Palm Butte off of what they described in their letter?
Where's that, on that letter? I haven't seen this one.
Oh,
Oh,
Oh, we all got that this morning,
sorry.
yesterday, when sometime this weekend.
That kindergarten mod is leaking again.
Yes.
Now, we had, in the big bond, we had
Correct.
planned
Yeah.
to replace all the mods at Pal Butte.
my concern is safety out there too.
I can. I can read this and I'll give Kevin a call and, talk about some of these issues. We do have some of this stuff already, money allocated to do some of the safety stuff, we do them already,
Okay.
but we'll just,
so I'd like to see numbers for HVACs and roofs, if that's possible, Anna, just to look at.
HVAC.
I'm excited about that. I'll get
the middle
costs going on.
Yeah. we should look at
Well,
it.
it looks like Crooked
for the
River
costs.
also needs it.
Well. Crooked River,
Band-Aid.
I don't want
yeah. I need to get back to you on Crooked River. I gotta look at what that looks like.
Cause
It's
you already
just kind of-
have,
it's a
Steam's Tiller boiler on the repair replacement in that 11.5, so I would be curious what it would be to add the other two schools that need the HVAC boilers as well.
So
Like
do you guys
Scott
want
said,
me to
what's the
add
difference in the pennies?
So it's HVAC and roofs?
We wanna see options,
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
Again,
Give us a roof spoiler and a roofs
Alright.
budget and a roofs and boilers budget and a roofs and boilers and HVAC budget.
what do you,
Okay.
because I'd be curious on what are you actually saving by doing
Right,
the HVAC roof? I mean, if it's
$10,000.
$10,000, then,
No.
but if it's $500,000.
Yeah, I don't know what the savings would be for sure. That'd be hard to project.
Well, yeah, I
It's
mean,
gonna be
that's a question
something
for
I-
the contractor. You wanna work inside? You wanna work on?
Yeah.
I mean, your,
What the value is to them.
when your core messages are, here's a picture of what's happening at the gyms when it rains, as recently taken by you, I hope. And we're gonna lose $6 million and incur more costs if we don't do this now. Those are your two things you're gonna say to the public over and over again.
Yes.
And is there any way to put later on, and I know we're running out of time, but any way to somehow put together just a small 30, 60-second video that says, hey, we need to go up for a bond, and this is why, this is what we're dealing with, this is what we have, and, you know, if this gets passed, we can fix these things. I think visuals are huge with people.
And it falls under our strategic plan for safety.
Yeah.
Right.
Because our students need to be safe, and I know that this, after the shutdown we've had a couple false alarms this year with stuff coming out that I think Dr. Yucca has been bombarded with just safety concerns from parents, and I know I haven't, falls under that, like safety of roof falling on their head. as well as just safety upgrades for security.
So I need to
issues.
just set the expectation, as soon as we file for bond measure, all of us as staff have to be very careful that we don't advocate for a yes vote. We can provide information, but it has to be very careful that that we don't look like we're advocating for it. So, just so I don't want you to expect that we are going to be putting out a lot of, marketing type things.
Right.
as staff, just know that.
No, yeah.
But I think if you write the bond measure in such a way that you show this is urgent, we're not asking for fluff, we're just asking, for safe places for our kids. I think it'll sell itself, especially if people see $6 million if you pass this, you get all your money.
Leland, there's one more question, sorry.
Okay, no.
I don't see the roof for the stadium on here either. Isn't that in need of replacement?
It's not leaking at the moment.
Oh, okay.
It needs to be replaced, but it's not leaking.
Because it didn't
It's not
rain
leaking.
today.
Right.
So that's something we could do later. It's not I don't even think
There's not a bucket in there catching the water?
no.
Oh, there's not. I
The
noticed that.
bleachers catch it all and it runs off the
Oh.
side or something probably.
Oh,
Right, I've seen that bucket in there catching water before, that's why I asked.
I need to
Oh,
rush us a little bit just because we're over time and I have very specific things I need to ask for. So, sorry. If I have 5 head nods, then what we can do is we can actually plan, like schedule a Zoom meeting. If you guys are okay with this, Zoom meeting, it can be in person too. I just was trying to make it easy. That we would come together and we would bring a resolution to the board to approve to go out for a bond. Cool thing about that resolution is we can put whatever number in there we want. We could say we want to the board can authorize us to go out for $50 million if we want. But then we say, all right, we keep talking about this, and then by the time we do that March 1st, applicator form that goes to the county, we have the real number that would be way less than that. So we could say, maybe if we want to add $4.2 million to this for the middle school boiler, let's say, we don't know exactly what that's going to be. We can't have that information by the time we have our meeting. We just have bond counsel write the resolution for some bigger number. And then we know, based on your direction, whatever the cost of that boiler is, that's the number you add to the 12 million. And we do 6 plus whatever that number is.
How soon do you need a meeting? I mean, I'm wondering if we could just attach a meeting to next week's listening session and do a quick meeting and then
Is it,
roll into the
what day of
listening
the week is
session.
that?
Monday.
There's only 2 board members allowed.
Right, so with the rest of you would have to go.
Oh,
away.
yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's okay.
But we could just attach them together since some of us already have that meeting.
so you're saying before the listening session, Scott?
Yeah, the board listening session is scheduled for the 29th at 6:30.
Right.
So we could just attach a meeting beforehand or, yeah, probably do a 5:30 board meeting and then roll into the listening session without 3 of you at 6:30.
Yes.
Just one idea for conserving time.
Yeah, I think we were mainly concerned about your travel.
So I don't leave till the 7th.
Okay.
Or if that didn't work, we could do it the 5th too, if you need more time.
I think that's 29th, that's fine.
I can ask the bond council if they can have it done by then. They seem to be eager to help.
Could we commit to either the 5th or 29th and let Anna determine which one's gonna work with bond council?
Yes, yeah.
Let's reserve your time, and then you work with Tammy to advertise it.
We do, or we have the meeting on the 12th that we already staged with Rob. So we could push it out as far as that, Anna, if you need that much time.
But the 12th is your regular school board meeting, so you wanna add that to your agenda?
I really want Scott to be there.
Then we should.
Is this
stick with
the
the
listening session?
I'm good with
5th or the
it.
29th.
We're trying to get everything.
I really want all 5 of, I should
Right,
have
because you want that
clarified.
unanimous,
I
right?
really want all 5 of you to be there. Like I said, that unanimous vote is important.
Let me know
Well, I
which
thought
one
you were coming via Zoom, Scott, because that's when we're picking candidates.
That's the 12th.
Right, so I've got
Yeah.
plenty to do. You don't need to extend my middle of the night staying up that day.
Well, we'll shoot for the 29th, Anna, and the 5th, just get back to us.
Back up, perfect. That's wonderful. So do I have 5 head nods on you guys are good with me going? I guess we are if we're scheduling a meeting. Okay,
Did you nod?
You just couldn't see me.
awesome.
And we'll support your plan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing it to us.
Yeah, do
Absolutely.
this way, but if we've got these kind of issues, I think that's how this comes.
So, yeah, that's
It's
huge.
a great idea. Thank you, Leland.
That it?
Thank you,
Yeah, sure.
Madam.
You bet, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Thanks, Leland. So Joel, could we carry on your other items? Could we move them to our next meeting? We're after 8 already.
We consolidated those all into one, so I don't have any more items. I'll bring the final strategic plan draft. We'll have that on the February agenda, so.
Okay. All right, anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so we will adjourn this meeting. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm getting better.
Okay.
We're not that over, we're not that over this time.